Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the biggest, the baddest, and the weirdest storytelling event in Fairbanks. Welcome to Dark Winter Nights, true stories from Alaska with your host, Rob Prince.
Hello, Fairbanks! How's it going? Happy spring break to all of you who can't afford to go to Hawaii right now. Like me. I feel bad for them because they're going to be missing out on an awesome show tonight. As you can tell, I have not used these for very long. I'm going to catch my breath a minute. Thank you to the Kangoo Club of Fairbanks for coming out and doing this introduction for us. You should check them out on Facebook, Total Body Fitness. It's an 80% reduction of impact on the joints, rehabilitation of injuries, 25 to 50% more calorie burn, which I can tell you, I think it was about a 200% for me just in the 10 seconds I did that. And clearly it improves endurance levels. Also, if you just always wanted to be taller or bouncier, I guess. So thank you to the Kangoo Club of Fairbanks, again on Facebook, Total Body Fitness. My name is Rob Prince, and I think UAF would probably prefer that I don't mention this, but I am a professor in the Communication and Journalism Department at the soon-to-be-gutted-like-a-salmon University of Alaska Fairbanks. At least Dunleavy sent us a nice little breakup letter this week. I don't know about yours. Mine smelled like vanilla, so. He did leave out the part, I literally cannot stand still in these things or I will fall over. He left out the part in most breakup notes where you say it's not you, it's me. So yes, the governor's budget is going over like a soggy sky lantern up at Fairbanks right now. You get it? It's like a sky lantern, but it's soggy. Can't. All right, Ruth, you were right. That's not funny. I thought it was going to be good. I've been wondering what we're going to do with all these unemployed PhDs that are going to be just, landing in the Alaska job market. As you know, we are really low on police officers. Chief Jukes is going to be retiring this April, and we got a number of other retirements going on. This is a serious problem we have, and I was kind of wondering what it would be like if you got pulled over by an astrophysicist. I kind of had this feeling. They'd be like, "Sir, do you know how fast you're going?" Well, let's see if we calculate what my radar detector here said, and let's see if we figure out our latitude and your speed and velocity, and then, of course, the rotation of the Earth, and I forgot to calculate the orbit around the sun. I almost forgot that, and then, of course, the orbit of the sun and the Milky Way, I think, do you have a graphing calculator? Sorry, I'll just do it in my head. So you carry the 1. Comes to 1.3 million miles per hour you were going, sir. Do you know what the speed limit is? 20. Oh. I'm going to need you to step out of the car for me. So, yeah, a little worried about how that's going to work for us here, but I'm sure we'll find places to go if necessary. It's been a while since I've seen you all. Since last November, there's been some interesting things that have happened. How are you doing on your New Year's resolutions? Good? I kept mine. Mine was to not go wandering into my neighbors' houses anymore. I have kept that religiously. See some other things. Congratulations to Brent Sass. Is this his second Yukon Quest win? Brent Sass has actually been on this show 2 times, and I'm not sure which he's more proud of, the 2 Yukon Quest wins or the Dark Winter Nights, but we're very grateful for that. And did anyone feel the earthquake this afternoon? Right. 3.7. Yeah, some of you are like, earthquake, what? Yeah, 3.7. It wasn't just your husband walking down the hallway. It was like 2 o'clock, 2:30. Yeah, I wouldn't go rushing to tell your friends in Anchorage about that right now. They're going to be like, yeah, did any roads collapse? No. Any schools shut down forever as a result? No. FEMA shown up yet? No. My water jiggled a little bit. It was kind of nice. So, yes, we're so thankful that no one was killed in the Anchorage earthquake last November. That's fantastic. Yes, we're going to do a round of applause for that. There was one upside to the earthquake. I don't know if you heard on Fox News, there's a road to the Aleutians. Did you pick up on that? So, road trip to ADAC, everybody, after this. We also had the government shut down. Do we have any non-essential federal employees here? Yeah. So glad you could afford tickets tonight. But I want you to know you're essential to me, okay? And I only allow myself that symbol one time, so thank you for your service. Your literally thankless service to our nation. The upside to the shutdown was I always wondered what people meant when they said cutting off your nose to spite your face. I was like, I can never think of an example of that. And then there was the government shutdown. I was like, who would ever cut their nose off to spite their face? And now I know who would cut their nose off. So we do have something serious to be grateful for, and I'm aware that I am not wearing proper footwear for this topic, but an arrest in the Sophie Sergey case. And I would just like to have, yes. I would really like to deeply thank the detectives who never gave up on that case. And it just has been a dark cloud hanging over this town for a very long time, and I'm hopeful that this means the end of that. So clearly we have an amazing show for you tonight. And don't worry, I am taking these shoes off as soon as I get off stage. Seriously? You want to watch me walking around like I'm like, hi, really? This adds a complication to the rest of the show, like, hey, how am I supposed to move this mat? Okay. All right, let's take an informal vote. Who would like me to keep these shoes on the whole time? All opposed, same sign? It's the front row who's like, he's going to land on us if he keeps those on. All right. Well, okay, I guess we'll try it. We improvise here on the show. It's what makes it fun. So you're going to watch me going. I'll probably lose 10 pounds, which would be great. So welcome to Dark One Nights. Anybody here for the first time? We got any first? Okay, some front row people. Well, my goal with this show is to make it as much like the Muppet Show in real life as we possibly can. And there was a moment yesterday in the rehearsal where I was over there talking to the Pause for Purple Hearts folks about the dog that's later going to take my sock off during the show. And the Kangoo people came bouncing by, and I was like, this is the Muppet Show. I am Kermit. Hey, no, I'm not even going to try. The question is, who is Miss Piggy in this whole thing? So, what's that? If you have a banjo right now. Oh, like Kermit, yeah. It's not easy being green. I don't know the rest of the words, 'cause I only thought of this joke a minute ago. All right, well, if you are new to Dark Winter Nights, there's a couple things you need to know before we get started. One is that there are a couple of very important forms tonight. One is your tax document. If you could fill that out with your Social Security number, home ad. No, I'm kidding. There's first of all, there is a memory form. And so we'd like you to fill that out with your memory, and we have a different memory for each show. This one is, I really knew I was an Alaskan when. So fill that out. We've got a bunch of those sheets around. If you don't see one, you can flag down an usher. You serious? Like, you're going to be able to do this for, like, watch me, like I'm standing. Oh, there was one, no. Yeah. Okay, you got me, like I'm standing on a hotel bed or something like that. Okay. Anyway, there's a memory form. We're going to be reading those live. It's really hard to focus. I'm going to bring it in now. We're going to be reading those live on stage. So get your memories in between storytellers. We'll have ushers coming around and picking those up. And we want to hear what your favorite memory of when you really knew you were an Alaskan. Like, for me, it was when I looked at a moose and my stomach grumbled. You know what I mean? For the first time. You come here like, oh, a majestic moose, and you think, oh, man, you and some carrots, potatoes. Sounds good. That's when I knew I was an Alaskan. So fill those out, turn those in to the ushers, and we'll read them randomly. And then we're also going to pick one audience storyteller tonight. So there's a form on the back of your program where you can submit your name. In the second half of the show, we will pick out a name, and one of you will be telling a story live here on stage. And you can or cannot wear the shoes. That's up to you. There are some rules about that. It needs to be a true story. Needs to have happened to you. Needs to have happened in Alaska. And we like it to be under 15 minutes. Or we'll get out the old hook, I guess. All right. Oh, and you have to put your own name down. So, yeah. Hardy har har. So hand those in between storytellers or during intermission. If you do... I feel like I'm doing this on a cruise ship is what it's like. If you do not want to tell a story tonight, be very careful how you fill out that form. We have a check that says, I want to tell it another time. Also for introverts, we have a radio show and podcast. So if you have a story to share, but you're not excited about coming up here on stage to do it, we can do that at another time. So I love the introverts. They're the ones who really run the world. We know that, right? And they also don't clap for themselves. That's great. Okay. There's other things on the back of that form. If you want to help us out with the show, you can get in for free. We'll give you a free T-shirt. We would love some more volunteers for that. So we're also going to have a 15-minute intermission. Food's going to be provided by Hutchinson High School's chapters of the Academic Decathlon and the Future Farmers of America. And I was thinking the other day, the way things are going, we might all be future farmers of America. I'm just kind of imagining my daughter coming to me and being like, Daddy, what are we going to do when UAF fires you? I'd be like, if UAF fires me, honey. If. Well, darling, we'll return to the earth. just like my great-grandparents and your great-great-grandparents, and the earth will provide us food and shelter and entertainment. She'd be like, does this mean we're canceling Netflix? No, it's not that bad yet, honey. It's not that bad. So all the proceeds from food during intermission is going to go to that. So get those memories in quick so I have things to read. I think we've got a few already. You can also post them on Facebook, facebook.com/darkwinternights, and we'll read your memories off of there too. Okay? Any questions? Oh, now you're quiet. Okay, that's fine. All right, for our first storyteller tonight, it's hard enough managing to stay alive and safe while adventuring out into the Alaskan wilderness with people who know what they're doing. It's much harder and more dangerous when you have to babysit someone who's not pulling their own weight, right? So our first storyteller tonight found out just how heavy pulling someone else's weight can be. Here's Hailey McCaig with a story we call Ultimate Survival Alaska. Patient. I won't hurt you. You good?
All right.
Okay. Good
Thanks.
job.
So about 7 years ago, I went moose hunting with my friend Jimmy. And Jimmy was a pretty well-known fella around Fairbanks. But for those of you who didn't know Jimmy, you may have met someone like him over the years. Classic sourdough type fella. He was in his mid-60s, white hair, big white beard, and a bit of a beer belly. He had a heart of gold, so kind and generous, and also just a total pain in the ass. Over the years, we cultivated a relationship that was more like family than friends. We couldn't stand to be around one another most of the time, but at the end of the day, we would have done anything for each other. So I signed up to go moose hunting with Jimmy, having zero moose hunting experience and very little experience in canoes, especially on rivers. And this trip was slated to be 100 miles on Birch Creek. So we were going to spend 7 days in a canoe together while we moose hunted. And we were slated to leave on September 1st, which was a Friday that year, the first day of moose hunting season. And I got home from work that Thursday, and Jimmy was just all in a huff, ready to roll. He wanted to do the vehicle shuttle that night, which caught me off guard. It was a lot of extra driving and time for very little time saving the next day, but I didn't want to fight with him, so I was just like, okay, let's do it. Got my friend Whitney on board, and we headed up the road to take care of the shuttle. And on the way up the road, we found out that some other friends, Emily and Greg, were also going to be starting the same trek, so we were going to help them shuttle their vehicle as well. When we got to the put-in, Emily and Greg were already there, and it looked like they were having a pretty heated conversation. Eventually, Emily came over and filled us in that she had forgotten her paddle. It's like, ooh, might need that. But at this point, I was so stoked on life. I was pretty new to Alaska and just so ready for adventure that it's like, don't worry, Emily, we'll totally find you a paddle. Let's go. Having no idea what was between me and where we were dropping the vehicle off. But we went to the only place in Central that we could, the bar. And at this point, it was Emily, Whitney, and I, and the three of us walked through the door into the bar. And if it was a movie, the record would have come to a screeching halt at this point. Every male patron in the bar just stopped drinking their beer and turned to look, and that was every patron in the bar. So we got their attention, which was a great thing because we were able to find a paddle very quickly. This fella who lived right down the road named Oli had a paddle, and he hooked, oh, you know Oli? Cool. So Oli, thanks Oli. He let us borrow a paddle. We got the truck set. Emily and Greg were ready to roll, and next thing I knew, I was back in Fairbanks and my 6 a.m. alarm was going off. So I knew Jimmy wanted to get a really early start, so I got up at 6 a.m., did my final little packing, and I was out on my porch, and I was ready to go. And I lived right across the creek from Jimmy, so I was looking over at his cabin. It was just like, okay, he's going to be popping out any minute now. An hour went by, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And finally, Jimmy came bursting out of his cabin like a chicken with his head cut off, and he was just like pulling gear from here, shoving it there, tying knots, untying knots, packing, repacking, like total mess. Like he was not ready at all. So after much ado, by the crack of 11:30 a.m., we were ready to go. So we made it to Birch Creek, and like I said, I had very little canoe experience, so naturally I would be in the back of the canoe where I would be in charge of all the steering. And Jimmy was in the front of the canoe moose hunting, which I found out on this trip that moose hunting must mean doing very little paddling and having a rifle between your legs in a canoe. And so when we first got into the river, we just started doing circles. And Jimmy and I both kind of looked at one another like, oh, ready or not, here we go. But I got it under control, and I figured it out, and after a little while, we straightened out, and then I was feeling like an old-time river rat, in no time at all, learning how to read the river, and I learned how to line a canoe through some tricky waters, and things were going well, and we were just cruising along, no personality hiccups, and it was just us for days. And by day 4, I was like, okay, I've definitely spent 4 days in the canoe with just Jimmy. And I had a little bit of a headache. I was probably dehydrated. I was tired, and I was just kind of needing a little break. So we decided to take an early night. We had already caught some grayling earlier that day, so I quickly set up my tent, got a fire going to cook the grayling, went down to the water to clean the fish, cut them up, get them ready to cook. Came back, and that time I think Jimmy had unrolled his sleeping bag. I don't know what he was up to, but he was really interested in how I was cooking the fish, and not in a good way. He was just nitpicking every little thing that I did, and complaining that a little piece was hanging over the edge of the pan, like I should have cut it smaller, whatever. And so eventually I was just like, okay, Jimmy, it seems like you have a really particular way that you would like to cut this fish. So, cook this fish, so just have at, do your thing. And he was like, well, it's just that I don't usually like to hang out with people that I have to babysit. Oh, okay. So I don't think I told him to go F himself, but that was pretty much the energy that I was emanating at that point. And I silently ate a few bites of fish and called it a really early night that evening. But I've got to give it to Jimmy. He really surprised me the next morning. He's not one that's big on apologies, but he did apologize to me the next morning when he got up. He told me that he was sorry that I was so sensitive about what he said to me last night. Really just such a great guy. So with that behind us, we just hopped back in the boat, and we were on the road again, so to speak, and had another beautiful day. I forgot to mention the weather this whole time has just been amazing. Sunny, 70 degrees, no bugs, just the days that we all live for up here. The leaves were getting more golden with every hour, it seemed. And towards the later part of the 5th day, the sun was at a lower angle in the sky. It was making the water a little bit harder to read. We decided we should start looking for a campsite. And shortly after that, I looked downriver and I saw 2 haystack rocks, so just rocks with water billowing over them downriver. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to split the middle, try to thread the needle between those 2, stay in the deeper water. And as I approached, I realized at the very last second that those weren't 2 separate haystacks. It was actually one giant boulder that was sticking out of the water so far that there was just water riffling on either side. And Jimmy realized at the same split second, and all he said was, "Oh, shit," as we careened into this giant boulder. So the next thing I knew, I was just like in a ready stance. I had one arm around the canoe, and I had the paddle in my other hand. And Jimmy had said that before we had started the trip, that if we tipped the canoe, that it was my job to hold on to the canoe and to not lose my paddle. So I did my job. But I quickly realized that the canoe wasn't going anywhere. So I was like, okay, got the canoe, that's fine. It was the force of the water had just wrapped the canoe around this rock. Like, it literally was not going anywhere. It actually, I think we found out later, it took 2 years for the ice to break the canoe free from the rock. But, so it was wrapped around there very well. And so I was like, okay, next order of business, I'm chest deep in near freezing water. So I climbed over the canoe on top of the big rock that we had just hit, and at that point was able to assess what Jimmy was up to. And I first just kind of saw this colorful spread of gear floating away down the river, and Jimmy kind of flailing his way to the shore. And for a split second, even though the water was rushing around the rock really fast and it was super loud, I had this moment where I caught my water bottle in the river, and it was just so peaceful watching it just slowly float away. And then I checked back in with what Jimmy was up to. At this point, he's running back and forth on the shore, yelling things to me that I couldn't hear over the water. And so I was just sitting there watching. He eventually cut down a willow and then jumped back in the river upstream and was floating towards me. I was like, what? And as he got closer, he was holding onto this willow, and he was like, pull me up when I get closer, pull me up. So I was like, all right. So I pulled him back up onto the rock, and then like, all right, great, now we're both on the rock in the middle of the river. Like, what's the game plan here? So he wanted to get some more gear out of what was left in the canoe, which I understand he had lost a lot of gear, including his rifle. And our food barrel was being held in there by the pressure of the water. So he was able to get a few more things out of the canoe, but it was super dangerous. If he had slipped, he could have easily gotten pinned between the canoe and the rock. But anyways, he did it. He was in and out of the water a bunch of times, and then we both swam back to the shore after that. So changed into dry clothes really quickly, and I was like looking at Jimmy. He was pretty pale. His lips were purple. His mobility wasn't the best. I was like, oh, we should get you warm. Even though it was a really warm day out, he had been in the water a bunch. But he explained to me that he had lost his bedroll. That was one of the colorful items that had floated away. And so I did some quick math. 1 sleeping bag, 2 okay, yeah. We should totally go look for your stuff, right? So we walked probably like a mile before we found his stuff, and there was really no and it was on the other side of the river, of course, where it had washed up. And so we looked and looked. We couldn't find a place to cross. At this point, the river was just so wide and deep. There was no real good place to cross, so Jimmy decided that he was going to swim for it. And again, I was like, oh, this is such a bad plan. But I don't want to have a slumber party tonight. So I became Jimmy's biggest cheerleader. I was just like, yes, you got this, buddy. So he started to take his shoes and socks off, and just then, as he was taking his shoes and socks off, this raft of Texans came barreling around the corner, another hunting party, and they were so relieved to see us because they had seen the wreckage like a mile upstream, and they had been looking for us and yelling, and they were thinking the worst at this point. So they were super stoked to see us. They helped us retrieve some gear, and then apologized that they couldn't take us with them, but they were totally loaded down. So they were on their way. That night we set up camp, and Jimmy put his bivy sack super close to my tent, which was unusual, and I'm just kind of like, oh, you lost your rifle, and I have the bear spray. Okay, so we had a little bit cozier night that night. The next morning we woke up and we realized we were kind of at the mercy of whoever else was on the river because it was 15 miles overland to get back to the highway. And Jimmy wasn't in a position to be able to do that hike. So we first went up and put some flagging tape along the river upstream so anyone coming down would know, be alerted there was something going on. And then we condensed our gear down as much as possible because we were basically thumbing it on the river at that point, like, ugh. And we had no idea how long it would be until someone else came along, so I decided to go back up river and go fishing. And as I walked around the corner, there were some folks that were on the river trying to figure out what the flagging tape was all about. So it was like, oh, they're like, I explained to them what happened. They're like, how's your canoe? I was like, oh, the canoe is done. The canoe's not going anywhere. They're like, oh, well, we actually have an extra raft with us because they brought a second raft in case they got 2 moose, and they had just gotten 1, and they were trying to get out because it had been so warm. They didn't want their meat to spoil. So they lended us this 8-foot rubber raft. We were just, the sun was shining on us that day. We really just had it made. So before we knew it, with very little time lost, we were back on the river again. It was incredible. And at this point, the water was really flat and wide, like I had said, and so it was just about 20 miles of flat water paddling between us and the truck. So we just started paddling, and before long, we started seeing some boats that had come up from Central. The water was deep enough that jet boats and things could come up. And we saw one kind of pulled up, just stopped, so we paddled over to say hello. And as we paddled up, someone went, Hailey? And I was just like, Oli! So we explained to Oli what had happened, and he was just like, man, you look like you could use a beer. He handed me a beer, handed Jimmy a beer. We sat there BSing, catching up. I was a smoker at the time. He knew my cigarettes got wet, so he gave me a pack of smokes, handed me a bottle of Crown Royal whiskey. I took a sip of whiskey and I handed the bottle to Jimmy, and he upended this bottle of whiskey, and it was just like glug, 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 glug. Just pounded it. And I was in such disbelief. I was just mortified. I was just like not even thinking about how drunk he was about to be. I was just like that was just so rude. Drinking all of some other generous person's whiskey, like you just don't do that. But they took it in stride. They were like, oh, it happens, no big deal. And they were headed upstream to go fishing, so we parted ways, and as we were parting ways, I was like, I'll see you in a couple hours when you drag us out of here. Kind of motioning at Jimmy, who was already slurring his words and like a little weeble wobbly. So they took off. At this point, I was in the front of our little 8-foot ovular rubber dinghy that didn't track very well. And so we started paddling. Not 2 minutes after the boat left, I just heard kerplunk. And I looked behind me, and sure enough, Jimmy was in the water, just totally incoherent, just like bobbing. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, thank goodness he has a life jacket on, oh my gosh. So I looked on both sides of the river, there were 8-foot walls. So I was like, oh, I can't really get him out of the water, so I just grabbed onto his life jacket and pulled him over to the side, and somehow was able to like superhuman adrenaline strength, like roll him back into the raft. Like, okay, I can't believe that just happened, but we got him back in, and I saw that there was a silt bar about, 300 meters downstream, and I was like, okay, we just got to get there. We can get him warmed up, dried off, whatever. And so I just started paddling, not really tracking, all over the place, heading in the right direction, and I heard splash. It's like, no way. You've got to be kidding me. Turned around, Jimmy's in the water again. So this time I didn't even try to get him back in the boat. I just grabbed onto his life jacket and started paddling my way to the sandbar. got the boat up on shore. I was like, okay, good. There's a bunch of driftwood. I see some birch bark over there. Like, I'm gonna be able to get a nice hot fire going, no problem. But at this point, Jimmy is ambulatory again, but like a 200-pound drunken toddler, like just like cruising all over, weeble wobbling his way around the sandbar. I was like, oh my gosh, he's gonna break a hip. Like, he tried to go back into the water. It's like, what are you doing? I don't know if he had to pee, like his pants were undone and they were part of the way down. And at this point, if it was a cartoon, right, you would have just seen the red line just going up, and then steam coming out of my ears. And he couldn't hear me because, he was totally drunk, and then also, like, his hearing aids had been underwater several times. But if he could hear me, what I was yelling was, "You don't like to hang out with people that you like to babysit?" Just livid. I eventually had to kind of just tackle the man and take him to the ground as gently as I could so that he would just stay down. And he eventually fell asleep, and I put him in his sleeping bag, and I got a big fire going, and the smoke from the fire was going directly in his face. But at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna cut my losses. I think he's got enough oxygen to survive. Like, that seems fine. So I'm sitting there chain smoking cigarettes at like 1 p.m. because I'm 7 miles from the truck, and I'm just stuck on this bar with this man. And before too long, Oli and his friends came back downriver. They were done fishing at that spot, and they whizzed by, and I was like, But they had seen me. They were just going too fast, so they turned around. They came back. And they're like, "What happened?" I was like, "This happened." And so they didn't skip a beat. They just started throwing gear in their boat. And they loaded Jimmy up. They got him kind of propped up, passed out in a seat. And Oli looked at me and he said, "You want to go fishing?" It's like, heck yeah, I want to go fishing. So we went pike fishing, and I caught a 10-pound pike. It was super awesome. I got the catch of the day. And then after we went fishing, they took us to the takeout where the truck was waiting for us. They helped me load gear in, and they got Jimmy in the back of the truck. He was snoozing away. So they left, and I just kind of had this moment to myself to reflect on how things had gone and what had happened. And I figured that my takeaway from the trip was Jimmy was right. It really sucks to hang out with people that you have to babysit. Thank you.
Hailey McCaig. I'm seeing a slight problem with our system. There we go. Okay, here's some of your memories. I really knew I was Alaskan when I got on a borough bus on a September day and sat down next to an old sourdough type guy. By way of a greeting, he turned to me and said, "Did you get your moose yet?" No one ever asked me that. I don't know what it is. Yeah. It's the shoes, isn't it? Finally, we've pinpointed the problem. I really knew I was an Alaskan when I realized the house we just bought was on a pingo. Isn't that like a piece of ice or something like that? And I really knew I was an Alaskan when at a party in the bush, a full honey bucket was carried through and no one even paused. Wait, I need that a minute. Could you hold on? Okay. All right, our next storyteller may hold the record for the longest distance traveled while going no faster than 3 miles an hour, although he may have to share that with O.J. Simpson. Too soon for that one? Tonight I'm going to interview him about what it's like to live life in the slow lane. Here's Mike Ruckhaus with a story we call Doodlebugging in Alaska. Okay, give us a minute. So we need more volunteers. So kind of people to do. Look at the jobs I have to do. Okay. It's going to be real nice to sit down here, Mike. I made it. Okay. So first of all, doodlebugging. Let's just begin right with the name of this story here. What is doodlebugging?
Doodlebugging is seismic exploration.
Why is it called doodlebugging?
Good question. I mean, I think it's because you're running these lines, seismic exploration lines. You go this direction, then you go that direction, and then that direction. And I think they used to do it in Oklahoma and Texas, and the guys would be sitting on the porch and going, yeah, those guys are just wandering around like doodlebugs. I don't know. I think that's where it came from.
Okay, nice. All right. And you were doing this when?
This is in 1978, winter of 1978.
Okay, and where?
We were northeast of Prudhoe. It was my first job in Alaska. I had been in
Alaska. You can go northeast of Prudhoe?
Well, barely.
Oh, okay.
Barely.
Right.
Certainly the coast sort of goes northeast.
Okay, all right.
So I had been to Alaska a couple times, but I got this job when I was down in Colorado. I flew up to Prudhoe. We got on a plane, and we landed on this little remote strip out northeast of Prudhoe, and I was assigned my bunk there, and it was a nice little cat train, not exactly luxury lodging, you know, these little trailers on skis that they drag around on the ice, your little 8x10, you know, slice of heaven out there.
Nice. And as I alluded to in the intro, you had some ways of getting around out there, but they weren't fast. What was your main method of transportation?
So I was a surveyor on the crew, so we laid out the lines that they shot. So seismic exploration is you vibrate the ground, you put geophones down, they measure the vibrations, and you move up a little bit and repeat. So we'd lay out these long lines, miles of lines, and we go to the next one. So to get around, we're out on the tundra and on the ice, so we had tracked vehicles, nodwells. And the nodwells were, I guess, pretty reliable. I was yet to be seen, but they had a top speed of some undetermined amount because we never could get there. But say around 10 miles an hour, but we were told that they break down a lot if you drive them too fast. So are the rules where you drive them 3 to 4 miles an hour, and they still broke down. But I guess they broke down less than if you drive them 10 miles an hour.
Okay, nice.
So most people are pretty close to camp. So 3-4 miles an hour they could get around, but as the surveyors, we were going anywhere from 10 to 20 miles away from camp to lay out the next line. So let's do the math, 3-4 miles an hour, 20 miles. We did a lot of driving, and we were putting in extremely long hours, and you know, there's tended to be this thing about sleep deprivation. And but since these things go so slow, and you just steer them with these little levers, and if you leave the levers alone, they sort of go straight. So if somebody was to nod off the odd few minutes, you really can't get too far off track.
And that's why they call them nodwells?
I hadn't thought of that one.
Yeah, you hadn't thought of that one. In the 300 hours you spent riding in that, it never crossed your mind to call it nodwell. Too busy sleeping, I guess. So you're going like 3 miles an hour, and these are those things that you've probably seen for sale on the side of College Road. I had my eye on that one. I was like, ooh, it's like a civilian tank. But slow, they break down a lot. And you'd spend hours and hours.
Hours daily. And so we getting the strategies, you know, there's two of us in the Nodwell, and we'd go out, just driving around. And we rarely went out. We always came back a different way when we went out. And you know, being surveyors, we'd always find these strategies so you wouldn't get lost, because surveyors never get lost out there in the middle of the dark and going across the tundra. But we developed a strategy so we could take shortcuts so we didn't have to follow our tracks back, which is we'd look at the maps and we'd say, well, camp's about this direction, and we'd look at the sastrugi. Sastrugi is just, I guess, some sort of Russian name for the snowdrifts, and the snowdrifts tended to be in a pretty regular direction. So it'd say, I want to go about this, that's about 40 degrees to Sastrugi, so you just point cross country about 40 degrees, and you just stay 40
And then-
degrees, and you go up and down, and you head back to camp.
And then just nap until you hear the screaming, and then you know you've made it.
Well, actually, on camp, they had a strobe light.
Okay.
So, you get within a couple miles of camp, and you can see the strobe light. So if you happen to be dozing, which we may have done once or twice, you wake up and you go, where? Oh, there's camp. and you go over there, and then we could hone in and get to camp.
Right.
So one particular day, we were coming back, and this young guy was with me. I said, we need to go about 20 degrees. This is the street. You sort of go that direction, and I know we're about 15 miles, 3 hours drive, 4 hours drive. We should be there. And it's my turn to sleep, so I go to sleep. And I wake up after a couple hours, and he says, oh, I can see camp. There's the strobe light. I sort of look up over the dash. Oh, yeah, there's a strobe light. And I go back to sleep. And I wake up. I look at my watch, and I go, God, we should be really close to camp. And I go, where are we? And he says, I still see the strobe light. And I'm following it. And I go, the math isn't working here. And I say, stop. So we stop. And, camp is this fixed point that you go to. And we're sitting there, and this little strobe light is sort of slowly moving. And it's the road grader that's grading the road back to Prudhoe Bay, the ice road there. So for hours, we'd been going the wrong direction, following the wrong strobe light. And so we had to I said, okay, now we have to this and go that way another 3-4 hours. So it was a very long night to get back.
Yeah, some words were exchanged, I imagine.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll leave that one alone. But what other kind of problems? It seems a little dangerous to me that what other sort of issues did you have with people basically putting the nod wells in cruise control and going?
Well, there's a whole bunch of people in there, and the mechanics were there, and they bailed us out. The Nodwells are this extremely reliable vehicle that only needed major repairs every other day. So we happened to be doing something not too far from camp, a couple miles from camp, and the track came off the Nodwell. So we called camp, and they say, we'll send the mechanics out. We see half hour later, they get their tools, and we see the headlights going out from camp. And then we happened to be out on the ice at that point in time, and the ice was not very smooth. There were back ice. The fall had made these big bumps. So we see the Nodwell going up, and it's going up and down over the bumps. And we go, okay, these guys should be here in a little bit. And then it goes down, and it goes up. And then the headlights are just sort of sticking strangely up. And we watch. And I go, I wonder if they broke down. They didn't have a radio. They wanted a camping radio. And we sat there and watched it. And I go, well, this is really strange. They haven't moved in a while. And they happened to be about a half mile away. So we walked over there. And sure enough, we come in, they'd gotten in between two blocks of ice. And the Nodwell was just sitting there going, and the mechanics had fallen asleep. So we go up, we sort of open up, tap them on, and they're like, huh, what? Are we there yet? And I go, no, dudes. This is
Nice. Now, actually, the first time I ever went snow machining was up in Ukjavik. So my question when I heard about this, I was like, how come you didn't just use snow machines? They're much faster. They work really well up there. Why not just snow machine your way around?
Well, in general, we had a bunch of gear you needed a Nodwell for. But it did occur to us, and we asked the manager, he said, even if we had one snow machine, life would be a lot better for us. And he says, well, we've never used them before, and we poked and prodded him. It was getting later in the season. It's getting lighter. It's getting warmer. And he says, okay, I'll get you one. Let's see how this goes. So we've been using it a few days, and boy, the life is good. We could get a lot more work done. We had one for the two of us, but we could run back and forth to the truck and all over. It was really working good.
You're getting up to 7 on that, I bet. You're like, 8 miles an hour.
But
continue.
We found the best way to get around, really, so instead of somebody going really fast out to where we're working, we just put it on a rope behind the Nodwell, and we drive out. And then one of the mornings, we're driving out, we're going out there, and again, it was my turn to sleep that morning. And you just sort of, it's really like a lullaby. You just sit in the Nodwell and just go out there. And my partner was a little disoriented, and he says, well, there's a drill pad right there. I'll just drive up on the drill pad, and we'll figure out where he is. But I'm asleep, and all of a sudden, apparently when he got up on the drill pad, he couldn't quite get turned around. And about that time, it comes to a stop. I wake up just to watch him putting the Nodwell in reverse so he could turn around. And by the time I could go, he was in reverse, and the back end went up like that, and then slowly smashed our brand new snow machine. So we, I mean, this took quite a bit of talking to get this one. But on the way back to camp, we said, you know, really we could do better. You know, really, the flaw in that was that we could really do better with two. So you know, two snow machines.
One was going so well.
One was going.
Two is going to be twice as good.
So we talked to the manager. We said, really, we're really sorry this happened. You know, and really, we could do much better with two. And so he decided, okay, well,
That's
we'll
the
give it a
70s
try.
in Alaska, right?
No,
Oh, you need something, sir?
Yeah, go. So we were working farther and farther out on the ice, and we had this really hard point where you for safety reasons, they said you can't go farther than this, and we really got surveying. Really, we had it down. You sort of sit side saddle on the thing. You have a bunch of stuff in your hand, and you sort of punch the throttle, the calibrated 110-foot punch, and you go, and then you hop off, you pull the chain, and then you keep going. So you could just the punch, you hop off, punch, hop on. Well, we had discovered, I mean, if you've been up on the North Slope, the wind blows all the time, and when you leave machinery out all night, it gets all drifted in. So every morning, we'd dig the snow machines out, the cowlings would be full of snow, and we'd dig it out. We did that all the time, but they're just getting pretty out, and they're getting full of ice and everything in the middle. But we said, well, really, we should try and bring these into a tent and thaw them out the next night or whatever. But we go out, and we're getting toward the end of our line. We said, well, we have, you know, like 1 more mile to go, and then we can't go past the pack ice. It's too dangerous. And we have our little calibrated thing. But I'm sort of noticing that the throttle is a little sticky on that.
Ooh.
I think it's getting a little ice in there, and we talked about it.
Should get that looked into.
Yeah, we should probably look at that. And you'd go, you do your little punch the throttle, you're sitting there side saddle, and you'd hop off. And sometimes if you don't get the punch on the throttle quite calibrated, the snow machine, you go 10, 20 feet past you, and then you'd walk up and get on it and punch it again. So it wasn't that big a deal. It's still moving, you jump off, and it goes. And finally, at one point in time, I punch the throttle, and I hop off, but then it just never let off. I mean, it wasn't going terribly fast, 10, 15 miles an hour, but I standing there watching this snow machine go off into the pack ice. It's going like that. Well, we couldn't go chase it with the other snow machine because we had these strict instructions not to go out into the quote-unquote dangerous pack ice, and sat there just that was it.
For how long did you watch this thing drive away?
Well, it was about 15 minutes, and then we lost sight. But it was still going. You could hear the little motor putting along. So it had a full tank of gas. We were prepared.
Mike Ruckhaus, everyone. April, ladies and gentlemen. New addition to the Dark Winter Night staff. Neither one of these. Okay, straight from the basket. You watched me do it. I really knew I was an Alaskan when... I'm just going to sit. That's easier. I really knew I was an Alaskan when I started calling any temperature above 0 warm. All right. I really knew I was Alaskan when my family left Alaska after several years later, I realized I'm still here. And I really knew I was Alaskan when every shirt in my closet had been purchased at Fred Meyer. That's awesome. Okay. All right, we all know that Alaskan men can be very chivalrous. All right, just humor me here, okay? They can be very chivalrous in odd ways. Our next story is an example of that. This story is actually so insane that it takes 2 people to tell it. Our first ever 2-person story here in Herring. Here's Linda Bode and Kat Kershner, Bode and Kat Kershner with More Than We Bargained For.
You're going to have to bear with me. I've had this really bad cold for about 3 weeks, so I'm hoping to make it through this.
I'm Linda Bode.
Hi, and I'm Kat Kershner. I'm a lifelong Fairbanksian. I've been going to Chitina since I was 7 years old. I caught my first king salmon. My dad might be able to fill in the details if he's selected as the storyteller later this afternoon or evening. And caught my first king salmon at 9 years old at Salmon Point, and been going to Chitina pretty much at every opportunity since then.
And I'm an Alaska transplant from Minnesota. Love to dip net on the Chitina, and I've been here since 1982, and I'm recently retired school teacher.
And I'm still teaching middle school in Fairbanks here. Linda and I met each other about 16 years ago,
Right.
when I transferred to Randy Smith Middle School. I was a science teacher, and she was a gym teacher at that time.
So we got to talking one day, and we figured out that we both really, really loved to dip net at Chitina. And being that Kat was lifelong Alaskan, I knew she knew what she was doing. So I was like, hey, we should get together and we should do this dip net thing together. It would be really fun.
Yeah, I've got this the system for looking at the weather, checking out the fishing reports and everything. So I thought there was going to be a really good opportunity to go do some really good fishing at Chitina. So gave Linda a call, and
it was like, right on, we're ready to go. Got my gear, took it over to Kat's, loaded up her truck, and off to Chitina we went.
yeah, it's a beautiful 7-hour drive down there. It was a gorgeous day. Sky was sapphire blue. The mountains were out. You couldn't ask for a better day in interior Alaska.
So we're driving, and we get down to Chitina about 3, 4 in the afternoon. And our plan was that we were going to probably camp at O'Brien Creek and then go out really early, catch one of the first boats out, and then head out from there.
Yeah, so for people who aren't familiar with Chitina, this is not sitting in a lawn chair with your line in the water sipping a beer. This is to salmon fishing what the deadliest catch is to crabbing, okay? This is the confluence of the Chitina River and the Copper River, 2 glacial-fed rivers coming together and then cutting through some mountains between the Mount St. Elias Wrangell National Park and the Talkeetna Mountains on the other side. So the best part, or the best place that a lot of people choose to fish, is right in this canyon. It's very narrow, very steep sides. The river is running really fast. It's kind of like putting chocolate milk into a whirlpool and tossing in a Cuisinart. The river is what you call a muddy river. There's a lot of silt and debris and everything floating around in it, so you can't see the fish and they can't see you. The generally accepted technique is to get a dip net, which is about a 3-foot wide basket net on the end of an 8, 10, 12, 14-foot aluminum or fiberglass pole, however much you think you can handle. The water is running very swiftly. It is not easy fishing, and you definitely don't want to take anybody down who doesn't have a pretty good idea of what they're getting into. A couple techniques. for actually catching the fish. One is to stand on a sandbar or alongside the river and actually sweep your net down the river. The fish are swimming upriver to spawn, of course, into one of their freshwater streams further up towards the Alaska Range. So the idea is to get the salmon into the net, feel the fish, hit the net, and then somehow pull it out in time before the fish has a chance to get out and realize what's going on. That's the hard part. You really have to have a lot of upper body strength for that one. Another way is to get a boat, motor up the river, stick your net in, drift down with the current, catch the fish that way. A lot of people who choose to go into the canyon, though, that's typically thought to be the best fishing, is you can either walk down the west side where there's an old railroad bed, walk down the west side, there's a trail, walk down to the river, and then get onto an outcropping in a rocky eddy where the water is swirling around back. The fish love to take advantage of this little free ride upstream there, and it's a lot easier fishing because all you do is you just stick your net in, the basket's already going upstream, and then you just have to wait for the fish to hit it and come up. What Linda and I decided to do, though, was take a charter, and this is the Cadillac way to do Chitina salmon dip netting, is you get on a boat, they take you to a place where they know the fish are being caught, they show you exactly where to put your net, and when you're done, they pick the fish up and literally take them right back to your truck. It's the best way to do it.
So that's what our plan was, to go with the charter. And as we were sitting there looking over our gear, and you got to put your gear in, you got to put your gear off to the side.
It's a first come, first served basis.
Right.
Yeah.
So you put your gear down so that you've got your spot reserved. And as we were doing this, the boat came up, and Mark, the charter driver, was there and greeted us and said, hey, what's going on? And we said, well, we'd like to go out tomorrow, and so here's our gear, and there's two of us. And he said, well, I've got a deal for you guys. He said, I can take you out tonight. There's a spot out there, beautiful campsite, nice and flat. You'll have nice opportunity to fish on one side, plenty of space to when you string your fish, to put them in. He goes, so would you like to do that? And we're like,
heck yeah.
Yeah,
this
we're going,
is great.
man.
Overnight.
Right, so that would be fun. So he said, but there's just one catch to this. How are you guys afraid of bears? And we're like, well, no. What do you mean? And he says,
we're tough Alaska women here.
It's like, no. And we didn't. I was thinking, like what proximity, but never bothered to ask that question, right? So he's like, well, where I'm going to drop you off, there's been 2 adolescent grizzlies that have been running around in that area. And they've just kind of been looking over the fish and everything, but they're not aggressive. They haven't seemed to be aggressive, but there are grizzlies on, they've been sighted at that spot. So we were like,
yeah, we're middle school teachers, for crying out loud. How bad can it be?
Grizzlies? Yeah, so we're good with it. So we said, sure, we'd love to go. And he said, okay, come back in a half an hour, and I'll take you up the river. So we got our gear, and we got there in an hour, and he put us in the boat, and we start to motor up the river.
Down the river.
Or down the river toward the end of the fishery. And our particular spot was at the very end of the fishery on the east side of the river. Now, the west side of the river is where O'Brien Creek, Hailey Creek are located, and like Kat said, there's this, the trail you can go up, you can get on a road. If something happens, you can get out pretty easily. On the east side of the river, there's nothing. There's just, you look back, and it's cliff. It's just straight cliffs. So as we're going down that river, too, I'm thinking, there's not really a lot of spots that the charters drop people off at. And usually they're just like mounds of, just the rock. The rock, and then you're there. So we got down there, and sure enough, it was a great spot. There was, off to the side, as you're looking, there's this great flat rock spot where it was like, okay, our tent can go right there. There's the rocks, the outcropping of the rocks, and and the eddy is right there. We can start fishing right away. And there was like this sandy shore, like a little bit of a bay area. It was like great deal.
It was beautiful.
It was
about
beautiful.
the size of
It
this
was perfect.
stage. It
Yeah.
was great
It was
by
just
Chitina
perfect,
standards.
yeah. But a lot harder to get around on since there's rocks all over, and just like movement was very much
Yeah, like
restricted.
about where the curtains are here, that's where the cliff was, okay? So we had
Straight
our
up.
spot, and then where you are, that's where the river was. So that was it. We're here.
But along that cliff, there was a place to rope off.
Oh, yeah, roping off. The other thing you have to do at Chitina, as if we're not having enough fun already, is you have to rope off, okay? That means you take a rope that's probably at least a ½ inch in diameter, but you don't want to do it any less, and you literally need to tie yourself either to a rock or a tree or something sturdy, because if you catch a log going downstream or a couple of king salmon like I've seen some people do, it's a 50-50 chance as to who's going in the river first or who's coming out. So you always
Right.
want to have something to back you up to keep you being the one going in the river.
So we roped up. We got all our gear out. We're really fired up. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful day. It's July.
July, yeah, first week in July, I
Yeah,
think.
first weekend in July. So like we've got all this daylight, and we're just pumped. So like we could fish like forever because we're just like really excited to be there and starting to fish. So we get all set up, roped up, and we start to fish, and they're hitting, and we're getting them, and we're getting about
Well, it's-
5,
we're
6
getting
an
more.
hour. Yeah.
5, 6, we get getting upwards of 10 and 12 sometimes. So this is
Yeah.
good fishing by Chitina standards.
Right. So like it's like, wow, we're going to get our limit here. This is really great. Fish are running. And then we see this little skiff come down across the river from just past us, and these guys are in there, and they're like fishing out of this like really tenuous looking boat. It was a real sketchy
it's
little
a Harding
boat.
Lake type boat. It's not a Chitina boat.
Yeah, and so they see us and they wave and, hey, how are you guys doing? Are you catching fish? And we're like, yeah. And
Yeah,
sometimes
we
we'd
can
have
hold up our
one and we could
numbers.
hold it up, and they're like giving us the thumbs up, and they're fishing too, and they're saying they're getting about the same amount, and they're checking in and out with us. So that continues to happen because
They
they
motor
go,
up, they drift back, motor up, drift back, and
Yeah.
we're talking back and forth and everything. That went on for about 2.5 hours.
yeah. So then they come along and they go, we're done, we're calling it a night. You girls have good evening, and they kind of wave to us, and off they went.
About a ½ hour later, this boat with no motor and one guy with a paddle leaning out over the side, paddling frantically, comes drifting by. The guy who's not paddling is going, "Send help! Send help!" And we're like, "We can't help. We don't have a boat. We don't even have a cell phone. We don't have one of those satellite emergency things."
And they go down really quickly. And the last thing we said we're overnight. We're staying overnight.
Have
And kind of
fun.
waved to them. And that was it. So off they go toward Cordova.
100 miles downstream, 60 miles as the crow flies. I measured it out this afternoon, 100 river miles with a couple lakes in between. So this was not going to be a nice trip for them. Luckily, we were able to keep visual contact on them. So as they drifted on down, I'm looking and looking, and sure enough, they were able to get onto a gravel bar or sandbar or something. They weren't on the shore. They were still in about knee-deep water, but at least they weren't going any further downstream.
Right.
Which
so
was
we knew they
nice.
were safe.
They were gonna
there,
be
At least
safe.
they were safe. Yeah. So
Safe.
yeah. So we keep fishing, and we got our eye on them, and we're fishing, and we're still pulling fish in.
Nothing we can do.
Yeah.
So-
So, and then we hear a motor. And on the other side of the river, coming out by Hailey Creek, we see this boat. And then Kat,
This is the only opportunity these guys are going to have for the next 10 or 12 hours to get rescued. So I quick untie myself, I rip off my life jacket, I run over to our gear, I grab our flashlight, I'm blowing on my emergency whistle, and I'm just making an absolute scene of myself, jumping up and down on this little bit of sandbar we've got going on, just trying to get their attention.
I was fishing. So I love to fish. I will not be deterred. So all of a sudden, the boat turns, and they are coming our way. So as the boat's turning and Kat is down on the shoreline, and I'm
Still doing my dance.
still on the rocks, the boat turns, and I see these guys point to the shore, and as I look, here comes an adolescent grizzly bear running along the shoreline less than 5 feet from Kat. And when
I'm oblivious.
and she's like facing the boat, and the bear's coming this direction, and I went, cat, bear. And the bear kind of, I think it saw her. It was close enough. It was like, and
could you miss me?
as it looked, it made a quick jog up right through where we eventually put our tent, through there, and up the game trail, up on the cliff.
He went up the cliff.
Went up.
We couldn't see.
And so she didn't
Lindy
see
yelled,
it.
Lindy yelled, Cat, there's a bear, and I'm already making myself big and loud. I can't do anymore.
Right.
So at which point I kind of lose all pretense of being a tough Alaska woman. I scream like a little girl, and I go running over to the rock to be with Linda, because I know, safety in numbers here.
And I'm like, don't run, please don't run. Just don't run toward me, So she gets up there. So she gets up there, and in the meantime, these guys in the boat, they think we've called them over there because there's a bear there.
And
we
we're trying
want
to get away from it.
Yeah, and we want to get away. And then when we explain to them, no, that's not why we called you over. Right down the river, there's two guys in a boat that really need your help because their boat's dead, and you're kind of like their rescue right now. So they were like, oh, okay, that's fine. And so they said, you guys good? And we're like, yeah, we're fine. So we go back to fishing.
We go back to, what else can you do at that
Right.
point? So sure enough, those guys went down, the three of them met up with the boat, everybody went to shore, redistributed the fish and the gear and everything else, put everybody in the front boat. I guess they had all their gear in the dead boat, and they come very slowly back up the river towards us, and they start to pull in.
Right. So they start to pull in, and they have it in their heads. These guys, they're like, okay, these guys that were down there, they're going to stay overnight. You guys are coming back with us to the creek.
And I'm like, whoa, time out, wait a minute.
No.
We paid our money, it's beautiful weather, there's great fishing.
And we're fishing, and now we're yelling. We're a little bit more where we're yelling, hey, bear, hey, bear. So we're not like, we're watching. There
like-
was nothing there.
It's like,
So-
we're like, we're good. You guys just, we'll do this tonight. You go ahead. We'll be up tomorrow, and if we're not, well, you know where we'll be.
Right. So the one guy says, he goes, well, do you want a firearm? And I said, sure.
Sounding a pretty good idea at this
Yeah, and look, I don't know anything about guns. I don't know what came over me. It was like, it felt good to say, sure, we'll take your gun. Sure. So when I said sure,
Yeah. Now, Linda's looking at me like, Kat, you were in the military. You know everything about guns, right? And I'm like, the most dangerous thing they gave to me in the Navy was a computer, for crying out loud.
So when I said sure, 5 guys in a boat all jump up simultaneously, no joke, and they rip off their jackets, and they are packing. They've got ammo strapped across them. They've got a sidearm.
They've got machetes.
Crazy. They are like, and they're arguing. They can have my gun. No. They're gonna take my gun. Here, no. And this one guy in the back of the boat, he's like, I've got the best point and shoot, and they're gonna take this gun. And he like kind of walked to the front of the boat, and they brought their boat into the shoreline. And he was so excited about leaving us his gun, he jumped off the boat, missed the shore, went into about here, thighs in the water,
His friends are pulling him back in.
Yeah, to get him settled. And he's like all the time looking at his gun, and
This thing is the size of a small baseball bat. I mean,
the fish
the kind
bats.
we used to kill fish with.
Yeah, it was like that long. It was like, holy mackerel, it's just. So they give us this gun and they're telling Kat.
Like, and they're showing me, how to do this. Here's the safety. Here's how,
Right.
and everything like, got this. All right,
And
we're
I'm
tough
just
Alaska
letting
women.
her do it because she's military and I'm not.
Yeah.
I secured it. She can use it now. It's fine.
So the guys, okay, didn't take our name, didn't take our number, anything else. They said, okay, well, see you tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, you can return this gun. We're just below the bridge, up on the main road there, white White motorhome, just drop it off tomorrow morning on your way out. And we're like,
Yep.
okay, bye, have
Yep.
fun.
No name or anything, and like
Nope.
all of that's being told to us as they're like going out, and we're waving goodbye, and that was it. So then we have
Then we
this
have the
gun.
discussion.
Yeah. So we have this gun, and we fished a little while longer, and then decided, well, we're getting a little punchy. It was getting late, so we needed to get some sleep, and we could
Yep.
finish up with our limit in the morning.
Yeah, we had about 60 fish at the time, and it's like, okay, I'll go set up the tent. Linda kept fishing. All right, so I go set the tent up, and as I'm setting it up, it's like, how can I stake our claim anymore? So I go ahead and I start marking the territory around the tent, if you know what I mean, doggy style.
I had no idea that was going on. None. I was clueless to that.
So being again that it's, pretty much daylight 24/7, being up north here in Alaska, it's about 11:30 at night before we decide we're tired, we're starting to, get a little uncoordinated. Let's go ahead and just call it a night, throw our
Right.
sleeping bags out. But we had no dinner that night. We didn't even open up so much as a granola bar. It was
No,
strictly
it was
a water
just water,
night.
water. We were like,
Water.
that's it,
Yep.
Made sure that our fish were all secure and everything,
Yep.
and so
Took off our stinky clothes, which are all totally covered in fish slime at this point. Like the whole place doesn't reek of salmon, okay? And
Yeah.
just leave our clothes and anything that we don't absolutely need, and we go shivering over to the tent and climb into our sleeping bags.
And then we have a discussion. It was like, Kat's like, let's get the gun in the tent. And I'm like, no way. No way. That was a deal breaker. It was like, no way. The gun, no, we don't need that
Yeah,
in
I
the
saw
tent.
Linda wasn't going to budge on this one, so we did come to a compromise. It was going to be on my side of the tent. I still don't know why. Underneath the fly out there, just outside the door, in case a bear comes in, like, I'm really going to stick my hand out to get the gun to shoot the bear in our own tent. So,
But it was secure.
and it was
It was
close.
secure, yeah. So it was all good.
All right. So we say goodnight, and Linda's head hits the pillow. 30 seconds later, she is absolutely sawing logs. I love you, Linda, but honey. At which point I started thinking about it, and it's like, if we're going to get mauled or eaten by a bear tonight, I might as well do it on a good night's sleep rather than sit up, listening for a bear, waiting for the bear to attack. So I stuck my earplugs in, and I'm no shrinking violet when it comes to snoring either. I don't even remember my head hitting the pillow. But anyway, it was lights out probably until, 5, 6 o'clock the next morning?
Yep. Got up, got dressed, finished off our limit, and there came Mark motoring up to get us. And so he pulls in, he asks thumbs up, we give him a thumbs up that we got all our fish, and he comes into shore. And as he pulls into shore, we're transferring our fish into the buckets. Loading up the gear, cleaning up the spot. And then we say to him, oh, by the way, Mark, you need to do something with this. And we hand him this gun.
He gives us this look like, where'd you get that?
Yeah. So he looks at it and, he's like, takes the cartridge or the magazine or whatever it is. He takes it out of the gun. And there's people in the boat that he's dropping off to. And they're like looking, their eyes are kind of big, like going, whoa. Those women have a gun.
Tough Alaskan women.
And so we're like, at this point, it's like, yeah, we have a gun. You have fish. First of all, we have fish, and we have a gun. So, anyway.
We're not scared of bears.
No. Because we marked the territory. So it's all good.
They were scared of us, so yeah, okay.
So we get back in the boat, and we get over to O'Brien Creek, and we get out, and we're just thinking about all the weirdness that has happened on this trip. It's just like one little weird event right after another. But we've had a great time, and we get our fish all settled in, and we go off down to Salmon Point.
Had no problem finding the guy with his
there it is.
With
Yep.
his motorhome, sitting around the fire, drinking a beer and everything like that. Hand the gun over to him, said, thank you very much, sir. He checked to make sure that it was all okay, and
he's
we
just
never
like,
did find his name or get his name or number or anything like
he's
that.
like, did you girls have to use that? And we went, no, we didn't see anything. We were all
Nope,
good.
we're good.
So gave him his gun, and then driving away thought, only in Alaska can men fight and argue over giving you their gun, giving a woman their gun, and not even leaving a name, a number, an address, nothing. Just, here's the gun.
So wherever you are, sir, thank you very much for your trust and confidence in us,
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll have a chance to return the favor to somebody, just not with a gun.
Right. And that's our story,
and we're sticking to it.
Linda Bode and Kat Kershner. I really knew I was an Alaskan when the Northern Lights started waving back. I knew I was an Alaskan when I found myself fighting with a sled dog over a chicken now dead that had wandered too close. I really knew I was Alaskan when I got lost in the woods looking for my property in Anderson. Is the legend here tonight? Yeah, what's up? Big David, the Anderson legend, is here. Have to check our podcast if you want to know what that's all about. I knew I was Alaskan when my Visa card was found in the parking lot and is now in the box office. Oh, no, that's just an announcement. Natalie, your Visa card was found in the parking lot and is now in the box office. Natalie. Okay. Even though you may have done something many times before, doesn't mean there aren't ways it can't get screwed up. I tell myself this every time I get on an escalator. I say, just because this thing hasn't turned me into grated cheese yet doesn't mean it won't this time. Deep breath, and we go. Our next storyteller learned this lesson from her 6th child. The screwed up lesson, not the escalator lesson. Here's Taryn Hughes with a story we call Unexpected Arrival.
Let the bass kick.
Hey everyone, I'm Taryn. This is Esme Louise. She fell asleep just in time. So Esme joined our family on December 12th last year, and she does join a big family. Robert was telling the truth. I have 5 children from my first marriage. We were Catholic for a minute. So for about 10 years. So she has 11-year-old twin sisters that live here with her, as well as an 18-year-old older sister who's about to graduate from Lathrop very soon, and a 20-year-old brother who lives and works in Girdwood, and a 15-year-old brother who lives in Delta with his dad. So the story I'm going to tell you today is not about bears or airplanes or anything wildlife or aviation or crazy animal confrontation centered. This is the story of her birth. It's a very vulnerable story that's close to my heart, shared with my wonderful husband, Ben, who is a flight paramedic, and that is very important, and you'll soon learn why. So it does actually start on a dark winter night. So December 11th of last year, I was about 10 days past my due date with her. I had been to the doctor on Friday, and I was 2.5 centimeters dilated. By the way, buckle up, this gets pretty detailed. So be ready. I was 2.5 centimeters dilated on Friday, and I was so excited. I called out of work. I said, this baby is coming this weekend. I can feel it, I just know it. And early labor started on Saturday. And early labor looks like this. You pace, you have contractions for about 4 or 5 hours. You lay down because you want to take a nap because you know that a baby is coming soon and you're never going to sleep again. And then your contractions go away. So that went on for about 3 days. Yeah, see, you guys, you know. So on Tuesday, the 11th, it was much the same. I'd been pacing and resting, and my husband had gone on leave as well, so we were just kind of waiting, and I had been nesting, the nursery was ready, the bags were packed, the house was spotless, the tub was clean. I don't know why that's important, but cleaning your tub when you're 9 months pregnant is really important. I don't know. So everything was ready, and we were just waiting. And so my husband had kind of began his nesting, his big final push before the baby. And he had hauled and stacked about a cord of wood that day. And then he decided to replace our refrigerator. So, which it needed done, it needed done. So he and his brother, they're both big dudes. They had muscled the old refrigerator out into the yard like a sled, just kind of shoved it out into the yard, and it was upended sideways and full of snow, and the doors were flung open. But the new one was installed, and that was great because it had a water dispenser and whatever. So he's arranging magnetic poetry. And it's about, you guys know what that is. We have the Pirate and the Come On set, and I highly, highly recommend that. It's I just want to fight a cluster of mermaids. Yar, it's great. Anyway, so he's doing his magnetic poetry nesting, and I'm pacing, and it looks kind of like this. We have a very open living room, kitchen area, and I'm pacing, and I stop, and I have a contraction, and I look out the window, and I'm scowling at this refrigerator. I'm you have to get that out of the yard before this baby comes. And then I'm sweeping up wood chips, and then I'm pacing, and then I'm stopping to scowl and contract, and then I'm sweeping some more. And that went on for about 2 hours. So at I think it was about 10:30, my timeline is kind of off, I decided that it was time to go to bed and try to get some rest. And hopefully the contractions would stick around, and they did, fortunately. So about midnight, we decided to go into the ER, up to OB triage. And at this point, my contractions were pretty intense. I had, you go from being able to talk and tell your husband to get the refrigerator out of the yard to not being able to talk at all. And that's where I was at. And my many past experiences had told me that that meant good things, that I was, progressing, and we were gonna have this baby tonight, and I was gonna be done incubating a human, and she would be here. So we go to the hospital. She checks me, and she says, "You're 2.5 centimeters." But I can feel her head, I can feel the bulge of her head. Okay, great. I'm still not dilating. So we walked the hospital for a while. My husband actually used to work at the ER as well, so he knows the area very well, and he found the longest, straightest hallway. So I'm pacing, and I'm kind of power walking at this point because it's turned into this weird, competition with myself. This baby is coming. Damn it. So, I'm stopping, and FMH has handrails all along the walls, which is amazing for women in labor. And I'm holding on, and I'm crouching over, and the nurses coming by are giving me reassuring glances. So I'm this is happening. Even they know. Nurses know. So we did that for about 1.5 hours, and we go back to OB triage, and guess what? Guess what my least favorite number is? 2.5. You're only 2.5 centimeters. I'm on the monitor, and she's saying, your contractions are not, there's no decelerations, which means the contractions aren't helping the baby's head engage in the birth canal. So basically, they were well, we can check you in at 5 centimeters, 4 centimeters, but not 2.5. So you can go home, you can come back in the morning, and we can break your water. And at this point, I'm okay, how many of you have been sent home from the hospital in labor? She gets it. Yeah. It's you're ready to play the game, and they put you on the bench, except you're in a lot of pain on the bench. And so, we start to head home. I decided I didn't want to be on monitors, and my husband, I think, God bless him, he thought he was going to take a nap. So we get in the truck, and we start to head home, and I'm just in tears, just demoralized, and we live off University, so we took Davis Road, kind of cut through that way, and it was snowing, and I was really not in a good mood, and I wasn't being very nice. Now, I wasn't yelling or cussing, but I had that church mom, talking through your teeth thing that you do. I was can you just not hit the bumps? I know you can't see them, but can you anticipate them just a little? Slow down. I'm not kidding. So we get home. we get home. And he's very kind. He drew me a bath, and I start to kind of mosey on to the bath, and he lays down in bed because, again, he thinks he's going to get some sleep. So he's, I think we were both relying on the nurse's, intel, like, hey, nothing's happening, go home. So, I'm still crying in the bath and feeling sorry for myself and having contractions, and the water helps, so I calm down a little. And then I get too hot, so I get out, and I get in bed, I join my husband, and have you guys ever heard of pregnancy pillows? They're like gigantic, the size of me. I highly recommend those if you're pregnant. They're great, but my husband called it the Great Wall because it was just like he was on an island over here. So I'm kind of cuddled up to the Great Wall on my left side, and he's over there somewhere trying to sleep, and my contractions got pretty bad, and then my water broke, which was huge. It's like redeeming, like something really is happening. You guys don't know what you're talking about. This baby's coming. But in the back of my mind, I was like, but they said I'm only 2.5 centimeters, so I have so much farther to go, and if I go back to the hospital and get sent home again, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So even though my water had broken, even though I was shifting from like not able to speak to grunting and like trying not to push, I still needed someone else to tell me that I should go to the hospital. So I look to my husband and I say, Ben, what do you think we should do? And he's like, well, I don't know. You're the one who's done this 5 times. So it turns into this, and this is another sign of active labor, transitional labor, where you start to like argue with people over nothing. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. Every birth experience is different, and I need you to empower me in this moment. I am incapable. I need you to make this decision. And he's like, well, I want to sleep. I think we should try to sleep. Because she said 2.5 centimeters. And I'm like, but I know, but you don't understand this. Ooh, So he's like, well, F it, we're going. So he's putting a pair of his pants on, and this is where it gets detailed. I warned you, you've been warned. There was fluid just coming out of me, and we get to the man door going into the garage, and I'm kind of holding open the door, and I look over, and he's in the bathroom, like brushing his teeth, because, again, like, he's been a flight medic for, I think almost 17 years, and the one thing I've learned in my relationship with him is that when a baby is born in transit for flight crews, or any kind of emergency transport crew, it's not a good thing. It's like, no, something went wrong, you didn't give him the right drugs, or something went wrong. So he doesn't have a lot of experience with the whole process of labor and delivery. So he's in the bathroom brushing his hair and like brushing his teeth, and my daughter comes out, my 18-year-old, because my grunting had woken her. And she's like, do you need me to grab a towel or something? Should we take this to the bathroom? And I'm looking at the floor in the entryway, and I'm like, this floor is entirely too dirty to have a baby on. And I don't want to clean my bathtub again. So we got to try to get to the hospital. So he comes out, and I said, I had checked myself for dilation, which I don't know what that feels like. I just know what it feels like to be trying not to push a baby out. And I had felt her head, but so had the nurse at the hospital, so had my husband, because he's able to check for dilation. What I had failed to mention to my husband was that when I felt her head, I felt her hair. Not like a bulge of a head, but like this fuzzy stuff. So we get in the truck, and he's like, we can make it. And we start going down the drive, and I'm like, man, I'm trying so hard not to push. But 2.5 centimeters, there's just no way you go from 2.5 to 10 in like 15 minutes. That is unheard of. Well, I guess not. I guess it's not. I just didn't know. So I'm doing this thing. I have my pants, and I'm like pulling them down, and this is the dialogue in my head. My pants go down, and I'm like, she's coming. And they go back up, and I'm like, no, you're being dramatic. She's coming. You're being dramatic. She's coming. You're being dramatic. Stop it. And so I'm doing this all the while my husband is kind of trying to get to the hospital, and it's like 4-something in the morning, Wednesday now. And we're going down airport. We turn left from university. The light was red, of course, because that light is always red. But he did the dude thing, and he ran the light, kind of looked, both, oh no, it's coming, okay. So we get through Washington, and it's green. We get to Market, and I'm not even kidding you. The light was red. You know how those lights work, right? Like, I think, this could just be me, but I think they stay green unless there's especially in the middle of the night, unless there's someone on the crossroad, right? There was the most bent over old dude, I'm not kidding, on Market and Airport with a cane. I'm not kidding, it was like something from a Pixar movie. He's bent over this cane and he's like slowly walking across like that, and I'm like, you've got to be shitting me, this is not really happening. Like, I looked at my husband and he's like, this is nuts, and he was going so, maybe it was because I was in transition, but he was going so slow. So that was the moment that I knew I was not a drama queen, this baby was coming. And sure enough, we get, I don't know how many yards past Market, an old dude is looking over his shoulder because my husband had veered around him when he finally cleared our vehicle. He's like, I think he got a show. Because by that point, my pants were kind of down and I felt her head come out, and thankfully she was face down and she had a long cord. There were no cord issues. I was able to kind of get myself in a better position, and the rest of her came out, and I'm not kidding, I caught her like a football, like this. So both hands forward like this, and thank you. My fingers were curled around her collarbone, so kind of on her shoulder blades, and I just turned her into me, just like a football. And she latched onto my left side right away. My husband is, flight medic. He's like, oh no! Like, she's here. I kept saying, she's here. And then, okay, the medical training kicks in. He's like, okay. There's steam rise. It was like I plucked her out of Sheena Hot Springs. Like, because it was 12 below that day, and we keep our garage barely above freezing because you don't want to spend that money on heating oil, right? So just cold enough to act as a second refrigerator. So anyway, there's steam coming off of her, and he throws me this, because I was sweating when I left the house. I didn't have a coat. He tosses over this wool coat, this wool jacket that he was wearing, which we still have, by the way. And he's like, wrap her up in this. So we wrapped her up, and I got her under my shirt. And she was warm, and she was nursing, and she was completely healthy, thank God. Very happy, nursing baby. It was like nothing had ever happened. She was like, okay, where's the milk? I'm going to sleep now. It was great. And so we get to the hospital, and we pull up, and he goes in and gets a gurney, and he said something to the staff, and he was like, my wife just gave birth in the car. I need warm blankets. That's a dude. So he comes and he taps on the window, and I'm sitting in the car covered in birth. And I'm holding her, and I'm blissed out, right? Because what a cool story. And I was so vindicated, you guys. I was like, I was right. Like, beyond, I think even more than I was happy that she was finally here, I was like, I knew it. So he taps on the door, and I'm kind of like, he opens it, and I'm like attached to this baby like a telephone. I can't move, I can't walk, and so by this time, the OB staff and the ER staff it was like, those like Grey's Anatomy, they're all out there like ready. And he finally is like, okay, I'm gonna pick you up. Okay, I warned you. He picks me up, all this afterbirth, all over the seat of the truck, all over, it was like a murder scene. So there's that. It gets worse, okay? You thought that was bad. You should just leave right now. So they're all standing out there, and we both work for the same company. I do business development. He does flight medicine. He does the cool stuff. But I see these people all the time in the ER and the ICU and otherwise. And so beyond the fact that they'd all just seen all of my business, my husband, being the ever-vigilant practitioner, he's like, looks over into the passenger seat, and he sees what he thinks is like a detached piece of the placenta or something, which isn't a good sign, and he picks it up, and he's like, you guys, is this I think this is important, but no, it's a turd. Then he says, the Ravens will get it. I'm really sorry, FMH. I'm really sorry, Ravens. I swear to God, I'd take a shovel with me when I camp. Give us this one time. This one time. It was an extenuating circumstance. So we get up to OB, and they were amazing. They kept joking about how they weren't going to be able to charge me for a full berth. That's right, I should have gotten paid by my insurance company for that. They were wonderful. The triage nurse came in, and she was deeply apologetic. And I told her that, I've done this before. I made the choice to go home. I decided to fight, my intuition with fear. It was my fault, not hers. And when you're in a learning environment like that, not all of your experiences are going to be those glorious, uplifting ones. You have to learn from somebody, and I'm okay with being the somebody. It was fine. They took great care of me. And she was back on OB triage the next day. So kudos to FMH. They treated me very well. Yes. We're supposed to talk a little bit about what we learned. I learned a couple things. I learned to trust my intuition. In my case, my contractions. I learned that the hard way. I learned that experiences that aren't ideal make for great stories. And if you ever need an automotive detailer, I know a guy. Thank you.
Let the bass kick.
Taryn Hughes.
Anakalotak, polyglipsy, pava mu chunrugut, uvanga adga asikluk, apaga sunguk, ali anaga eileen me, vorga fredlu eglu, akaga gasilu marilu, kork mu runga, hello. We have no word for hello or goodbye. So I said Anakalotak is good evening. I also said polyglipsy is welcome. Welcome back to the second part of the intermission. I hope you all are having a good time. Awesome. I also said we are the Pava Nupak dancers. This is obviously is not all of us. Some of them are on spring break for some reason. They may be in Hawaii. I don't know. But these are some of us that were able to stay here. Pava, we are a local community and Nupyak dance group, and Pava means away from the sea or towards the mountain. And since a lot of Nupyak people are our traditional ancestral lands are northern part and northwestern part of Alaska, we are pretty much away from the sea as much as possible. So, but we welcome anyone to join our dance group. Like Rob, I guess you could say Savaktunga, University of Alaska Fairbanks School of Education. I'm a faculty member at the School of Education over at UAF, and I'm the 15th Nupyak person throughout history to ever earn a PhD. So. I introduced myself in that little long introduction. Uvanga Adiga Asikaluk. My Nupyak name is Asikaluk, and it means bad boy. I wasn't named because I was a bad boy. I wasn't a bad boy. I was named after one of my great uncles, so if elders ask me my Nupyak name, they know my family tree just by that. I introduced that my mother and father are the late Clifford and Eileen Topcock from Teller, which is north of Nome, the end of the Iditarod Trail, end of the Iditarod. And I'm a person of the Quark people. There's a lot of different types of Nupyak people that live here in Fairbanks. And I'm going to have the rest of the remaining of our dance group members that are here to introduce themselves.
My Nupyak name is Kitawak. It means no name. So whenever you need my attention, you could say, hey! My white fox name is Joseph Bjorn Topcock. I'm currently 14 years old and I go to FE Cochrane.
Ataga Anamak. Hi, my name is Margaret Rudolph. My Nupyak name is Anamak. My father is Stephen Sezeski, and my mother is Rose. Did we do this? Sorry. And their parents are Peter and Teresa Mack, originally from King Island. And I am an interstate PhD student at UAF, studying cross-cultural science education.
Uvanga Atiga Ugik. My Nupyak Eskimo name is Ugik. It was given to me by my Anna, which means grandmother, the late Flora Carmen from Deering. My grandfather is the late Evans Carmen from Deering. My parents are the late Jim and Dorcas Sears from North Pole. My English name is Flora Roddy. I am an admin secretary for the Fairbanks School District, and new since November, I am one of the caretakers at the fairgrounds. I've been involved with the Pava and Nupyak dancers since about 2000. I am a volunteer with the World Eskimo Indian Olympics, and I also belong to the Soaring Eagle Drum. I am very happy to be here. Thank you.
Uvanga Atiga Anohuk. Anohuk is my Nupyak name, and it means little girl. And my white fox name is Amy Topcock, and I am the wife of Dr. Sean Topcock. So you'll notice that little girl married bad boy. That was not planned, but we did have to, because where his father is from and where my father is from, which is my parents are Delano and Minnie Barr. My dad's from Shishmaref and his dad's from Teller. Those are not very far apart in Alaska. We had to check with our parents to see if we're related. Of course, we're not. But I do want to say that my grandparents are the late Herbert and Victoria Onalik from Noatak, and also the late Catherine and Gideon Barr of Shishmaref. And I tell you this because in Alaska, we often have to explain and know our family tree because we often meet many other family that we don't know that we're related to. So, but at this time, we'll go ahead and tell a story. And as you know, we've been listening to really great stories here today. I've been really thinking about, wow, we have so many different experiences here in Alaska, whether we come from here originally or not. And so
this story that my lovely wife, whose birthday's on Wednesday, she's going to be turning years old. Sorry, some technical difficulties. At any rate, the story that she's going to be sharing is called, what we call a Nukok, is an old legend story. And the title of this legend story that has been passed down from generation to generation for thousands of years, it's called Kaik Tugalu Tulagagalu. So can you say Kayuktuk?
Kayuktuk.
That means fox. So Kayuktuk.
Kayuktuk.
Okay, very good. Now, and the raven is Tulagok.
Tulagok.
Now, if you mispronounce it, you're saying something totally different. And you not only insult me, but you insult the rest of the people that are. I'm just joking. Tulagok.
Tulagok.
Okay, very good. So, and we put in a lu at the end of each of those words that mean, so that they're connected. So it's the fox and the raven. Kaik tugalu tulagagalu.
So you'll see that with our dance group, we do try to pay attention to many different things that are within our culture. And so about 24 years ago, Sean created this dance that we're going to perform for you, but it is based on an old Inupiaq tale, Kayuktuklu Tuaglagu. And so the way the story goes is that the fox is a trickster and the raven is a trickster, and they're always trying to trick each other. And so Fox invited Raven one day to go up on top of this really big hill. And he said, "Come on, Raven, let's go slide down this hill." And Raven, he already knew about this big mud puddle that was at the bottom of the hill. And so, but he knew he didn't want to let Fox beat him or trick him. So he said, "Sure, I'll slide down this big hill with you." So they both went to the top of the hill, and at the very top, they said, "Okay, now we're at the top. Let's see who's going to go down first." And Fox said, "Why don't you go down first?" And again, Raven knew about this big mud puddle at the bottom, and he said, "Sure, I'll go ahead and slide down." And so Raven, he went ahead and slide down at the hill, but at the last second, he flew over the mud puddle. But it was so tall, Fox at the very top, he couldn't quite tell what happened with Raven at the bottom of the hill, and so he yelled down and said, "Raven, did you make it?" And so Raven, he said, "Yes, it's fine. I know there's a mud puddle down there. Did you make it?" And so Raven told Fox, "It's fine. You just need to jump over it." And so Fox, he gets ready and he slides down the hill, and at the very last second, he tries to jump over the mud puddle, and he lands right smack in the middle.
So 24 years ago, I worked at Joy Elementary School, and I was asked if I knew any Raven dances. And I was encouraged, we were encouraged by our Inupiaq instructor over at the university, the late James Nagyak from Auditorium Pass. And he encouraged us to create our own stories. So what I had done is I created a Sayun, or a motion dance. And motion dances are basically storytelling dances. And I created it based on Kaik Tugalu Tulgagalu. And I did this and taught third graders how to dance this dance. And so this is when our youngest was probably about 6 months old.
Our oldest.
Our oldest, not our youngest. This is
No.
our youngest. He's
This
14.
is our youngest.
He's
Can you
14
believe
years
14?
old. And he's not even wearing one of those kangaroo thingies. I'm trying to figure out how can I put a kangaroo thing on my mucklucks, but might be a little bit dangerous. Our oldest was about 6 months old, and so I created this dance, and then, but we've started this dance group, the Pavva Nipyak Dancers, close to 20 years ago. And so we maintain this dance, and we've gifted this dance to a group down in Southeast. We also just recently, early summer, Amy and I went to Elam, Alaska, and they've been trying to revitalize native dancing. And we gifted all of our songs to Elam, Alaska, so that they could perform dancing, because dancing is such a big part of our cultural heritages. So. So I'm going to go ahead and explain what the Sayun, or the motions, are. And while I'm explaining it, hopefully they're performing things and not doing any bunny ears or anything like that. So we had to simplify it. And so the motions are, there's the fox, and he's a trickster. And there's the raven, who's also a trickster. And they've never tricked each other before. And the fox knew about the hill, and at the bottom of the hill was a big, huge mud puddle. And the raven also knew about the hill, and he knew about the big mud puddle. And again, they're both known as tricksters, so they've never tricked each other before. And this is a story that's has been told when what our ancestors say when the Earth's crust was thin. It's very long time ago. So to the beat of the drum, the raven goes down first, and he slides down the hill, and he flies over the mud puddle. The raven, thinking that the mud puddle wasn't as big as he thought it was, the raven, the fox, the Kaiktuk. So Kaiktuk, thinking that it wasn't as big as he thought the mud puddle was as thought it was, he slid down the hill, and he jumped as high as possibly could and landed right smack in the middle of the mud puddle. And so that's why they don't play together anymore. I want to say Queenekpuk, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the night. Queenekpuk.
for the one woman over here who was like, take them off. I took them off. Well, we are loving your memories tonight, so I'm going to double up on how many we do here. First of all, the Pava Nupiaq dancers, I want to thank them. When I started Dark Winter Nights in 2014 over in Pioneer Park, afterward, a number of people would come to me and say, wow, this is such an original, amazing idea. And I was really flattered, but, it's just not true, Not only is this not an original idea, this is one of the first ideas. And you know what I mean? It's first thing you do is you hurt yourself, then you have an idea, I should tell people that I hurt myself, right? And their ancestors have been telling stories here on Dark Winter Nights for eons. And so it is just such an amazing moment for me to see that, to watch them continue to tell those stories here in this place. So Dark Winter Nights is nothing new, and they were the first ones to do it here. So I want credit where credit's due. I really knew I was an Alaskan when airports with more than 6 gates started to feel like the 9th circle of hell. These are good. I don't read a lot of these. Any that we don't get through, we're going to post on Facebook for you so you can catch up on it. I really knew I was an Alaskan when I woke up early one morning because my apartment was shaking, thought, earthquake, and went back to sleep. Oh, this is a good one. I really knew I was an Alaskan when I got into the wrong Subaru. More than once. This is not my dog. Why is this car so clean? Oh my gosh. We're just going to do a night of these sometime. I really knew I was Alaskan when I was given a moose rib at a potlatch and it was Fred Flintstone size. I knew I was Alaskan when we broke the tail wheel off of the Super Cub on landing and used a bundle of willows as a makeshift lashed on spring to take off again. Yeah, I'm sure that's FAA approved, so I think that's a pilot's allowed maintenance. I really knew I was Alaskan when I shot a caribou with a federal tag in a no-motor zone, so I hauled it out on my bicycle. All right, we'll stop on that one. I'm curious the direction of that. So, okay, up next we're gonna pick out our audience storyteller. So one of you is gonna be on stage here soon. I hope you remember the rules. If not, it's too late now. So, send in Malik, the Pause for Purple Heart's dog, and his handler, Betsy Jacobs. We have props. Get your cameras ready. If all goes well, Malik is going to take my sock off. Let a dog go on the first date. There we go. That's close enough. Malik's got the storyteller name, but before we get into that, tell us a bit about Pause for Purple Hearts. What's going on here?
We are a service dog organization. We train service dogs for veterans with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, or mobility impairment. The dogs start training at birth, and they graduate between 2 and 3 years of age. And we provide canine-assisted therapy in the form of therapeutic dog training to veterans and service members in the community who are interested in learning how to train service dogs for fellow veterans.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for what you do for the community. And I understand the dogs are trained to do about 100 different commands, correct?
Yep, everything from open the fridge and bring you your bottle of water.
Yeah, bottled water is where I was going to.
Turn on the light switch, help you take off your jacket. Okay. Oh, millions of things. It's great.
Okay, and so we're going to try here, see how Malik's feeling, but We're going to see if Malik will take my sock off, right? Okay, we got a spare sock, so I don't have to wreck the Frank's menswear sock. Camera's ready, did I say? You're not going to want to miss this one. Okay. Yes, yeah, I told you, a nice sock. What did I say? Sock. Good boy. Good boy. Can you believe that? Good boy. Okay. Good boy. All right. That's the only one we're going to do on me, right? You want to demonstrate some of the other things that Malik can do?
He's going to help me take my jacket off.
Okay. There we go. Round of applause for Malik. Okay, we got a couple. He's going to turn the light on here. He's applying to be our new lighting tech for Dark Winter Nights. Yeah, that's it. All right. Anything else you want to? Oh, there's your bow. Okay, thank you very much. Malik and Betsy Jacobs. And they've got a table out in the lobby if you'd like to learn more about that. Okay, here comes the storyteller name. And you know, there are key moments in life that can really change someone's life. They're usually not covered in dog spit, but at any rate. All right, our storyteller tonight is Bobby Burgess. Come on, go up that way, or go that way, or you violate Hutchison, or where are we? Lathrop High School safety policies. So, all right, one more round for Bobby here. Good to see you. All right, yeah, I appreciate it. Yes. Don't want to lose that. I had big shoes, now I only have one shoe.
So you never think your name's the one that's going to get pulled, right? So I know which story my kids want me to tell, but the problem is it bends the rules a little bit. It's so what I'm going to do, it's a fake story that they want to tell, a fictional tale. But I'm going to tell the story about the making of the story. Is that acceptable, Rob? Okay, he's giving me the all clear. So, gosh, I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was about 12, 6th grade, something like that, when my cousins and their parents, my aunt and uncle, came up to visit us. And we took this epic road trip down to Valdez to do some fishing. Well, I remember the first thing that happened is they got there, it was a little bit late, we had dinner, whatever, and they went to bed, and we had this house with these big picture windows and pull-out couch in our living room. And so that's where my aunt and uncle slept, was in the pull-out couch in that living room. So big picture windows, we had Venetian blinds, but a little bit of light got in on the edges, and it was the middle of summer, So they were from California, not used to that. And I remember, us kids were all really excited. Me and the 3 boy cousins, they were all sleeping in my room. upstairs, and we were really excited to see each other. So of course we were staying up late, talking, whatever, and their dad comes storming in the room. He says, "Do you have any idea what time it is? Go to bed." And that happened probably 3 or 4 times. Finally, we were like, okay, we get the message, Brian, we'll be calm here. So we go to bed, but we get up at like 7 in the morning. It's been light all night. Brian didn't get any sleep. Brian and Judy are, they're just haggard. So they come crashing in again. "It's so late, you guys need to be going to bed." And we're like, "We just woke up, it's 7 o'clock, Not used to that Alaskan daylight, right? So already they're getting a dose of Alaska. Next thing to do is, we hit the road a little while later, and so they got a taste of our Alaskan roads, bumpy. On the way down, we're heading all the way to Valdez, but we're taking it easy. So we stop in Delta, right, for lunch on the first day. And that's where we found the object of the story here. So we have lunch, and Cameron, the oldest cousin, he's like a year or 2 younger than me, something like that. And we decided we're gonna go on a little stroll. We finished our lunch before everyone else. So we were walking by the split rail fence and the campground there. And Cameron's kind of running up ahead of me. And all of a sudden I see him pause. He's looking over the fence and he says, "It's a hand!" A hand. So this is the story of the Delta hand. So, of course, we all come running over. I'm the next one to get there because I was right behind him. And I look over the fence, and sure enough, there's what looks like a hand just sitting there. It looked like it was missing the top knuckles, and it was old. It had been around for a while. Looked like, the skin was nearly translucent. Very disturbing. So the whole family comes over, and we're all looking at it, and, we poke it with a stick. Turn it over, and then my father, being the decision maker there, he says, let's just go. So we head out, after lunch, we pack up everything, and we head down the road, and we get down the road to the next campground, wherever it was. I wasn't paying attention, and get out. Set up camp and everything, and then around the campfire that night, my dad tells a story, a scary story about the Delta hand. And so this is how it went the first night. The story goes, we saw the hand, we did all the stuff, poked it with stick. Then everybody gets in the car, gear's all packed up, and what we didn't notice, of course, is that the Delta hand sprung into life. And it came climbing, scurrying after us. And it leapt up and grabbed onto the bumper of the minivan. It was a Toyota Previa. So we, so that's the story that gets told, and that's kind of where it ended that night. The next night, further on down the road, campfire again, and my cousin Ryland, the middle of the 3 boys, he nearly fell in the fire. I don't know exactly how it happened. He claimed he was pushed. This is, by the way, back to real life. And of course, nobody pushed him, right? Nobody admitted to pushing him. But from then on, that night, we called him Rye Crisp. He was a little toasty. So the story that night became, the hand scurried after the van. It grabbed onto the bumper, waited until we were at the next campground, and then when we were hanging out around the fire, it tried to push Ryland into the fire. Right. So the story is evolving as the trip moves on. We get further down the road. We stop at a campground. There were some rangers there. I don't know where it was. Told us all about bear safety and everything. And of course, the whole time we're all thinking, well, what about hand safety? Right. So this, it was a harrowing adventure, you guys. I mean, I was 12, right? This hand was real in my mind. So we we move on further down, and these Alaskan roads come back into play, right? They're used to these nice California roads, right? Nice and smooth. And so when they're on road trips, one of the things they would do to save time would be to not pull over for the pit stop, but instead you just use a cup, right? Some of you have anticipated. So Stuart, my youngest cousin, have you guys ever seen Malcolm in the Middle? Okay, the youngest kid, Dewey, that's Stuart, right? He looks just like him. He's got those big ears. That's Stuart. Yeah, Uncle Stu, Violet. That's right. That's what he used to look like. So Stuart is, using a cup to avoid the pit stop. And we hit a pothole. Ka-chunk. And this is my Aunt Judy driving my mother's van, and it was a couple weeks later that I outed her and told my mother what happened, because Judy didn't. So spilled, the cup on the seat, and Judy was like, "Oh no, Libby's gonna be so mad at me. It's her van." And Stuart was like, "Ryland pushed me, No, nobody pushed him. We just hit a bump." But he was convinced that somebody else was to blame. It wasn't his fault. Of course, he's a kid. He was about 5. And so then that night around the campfire, the story became: hand scurries, grabs the back of the bumper. First night, it pushes Ryland into the fire, tries to. Next night, it on the road trip, as we're continuing, it knocks the cup out of Stuart's hand. Right. So this hand is full of mischief. Next night, my sister, she woke up in the middle of the night gasping, like she was struggling to breathe. She was having a dream. So of course that got wrapped in the story. The hand, she woke up with it around her throat. So this hand, it's getting more and more intense. This hand is just, at first it's innocent tricks. It's getting more malicious. And then, and we get down, we do our fishing and whatever else. We're heading back up, and we're like, it's the last camp spot before we head all the way back to Fairbanks. And I was strangely, this never happens, but I was the first one up in the morning that night. And I walk out of my tent, and there's this lone wolf just walking through camp. One of the coolest things I've ever seen in Alaska. Just me and this wolf, and it looks over at me just for a second before running off. Really kind of a scary, moment for me, but also pretty cool. So then, the next night, after I tell that story to everyone and they wake up, the next night the story becomes, the hand scurries out of the bushes after the car, grabs onto the bumper. That night it pushes Ryland in the fire. Later on, it knocks the cup out of Stuart's hand, then it tries to choke Christine in her sleep. And then I woke up when Christine was getting choked in her sleep, and I wrestled the hand off of her throat and got it out of the tent. It was a surprisingly strong hand. And I go out just in time to see this wolf, and I throw the hand to the wolf, and the wolf leaps up and catches it, right? Catches the hand, and it runs off into the bushes, wrestling. The hand is fighting with the wolf is fighting with the hand. It's very dramatic. And that's the last anyone ever saw of the Delta hand. Now, quick note. It probably was not actually a human hand. If you've ever seen a bear hand, the bear paw that's mostly decomposed, it looks a lot like that. And so just in case anyone was wondering why we didn't go to the police, my father's a biologist. It's all good.
Bobby Burgess. Yeah. I'm afraid the hand struck again tonight, and it took Valerie's Visa card out of her pocket and threw it in the parking lot. and your Visa card is over at the office. Okay. More memories. I think it was Valerie, Victoria, I can't remember. Okay. I really knew I was Alaskan when my family grew up on salmon, moose, caribou, sheep, muskox, deer, grayling instead of beef. I really knew I was Alaskan when I used my Alaska Airline miles acquired using my Alaska Airline credit card to fly home with a cooler full of Alaska salmon as part of my luggage. Keeping it in the state. I really knew I was Alaskan when my mom got down into the pit of our outhouse periodically to chop down the tower. Before it could reach the seat. I'm afraid I know what she's talking about. I was rooting for the tower, actually. I was like, you can do it. Keep climbing. And then we had guests coming over, and I was like, we got to get rid of the tower. So I take a Fred Meyer bag, and I wrap it over a sledgehammer in my hand, and I go, ka-tink. And the tower goes thonk, right like that. I was like, oh, this tower. I shouldn't have been rooting for you. You have grown strong, giant brown one. I really knew I was Alaska when I finally learned that the throttle on a snow machine is variable speed. You get it? It was just like, okay, all right, fine. I really knew I was Alaska when I didn't have to dress up for Sunday church service. And finally, we're fans of not dressing up for church, okay. And I really knew I was Alaskan when I added bear spray to my wedding registry. I love that. These are so good. We got too many good ones tonight, so check it out on Facebook for more. A lot of Dark Winter Nights stories could start with the line, we really should never have tried to do this trip. Chris Solinsky, one of our executive producers, his story could have started that way. Jesse Robertson's story last April. Brent Sass, both of his stories probably could have started that way, including Hailey McCaig's story. Probably could have started with, we should never try this trip. Our final story tonight falls squarely into that category when Mike Speaks and his friend embarked on an ambitious backcountry trip that was well beyond their skill level. It really is a miracle that they survived, and they owed a lot of that to a literal angel from above. Here's Mike Speaks with a story we call Birds of Paradise.
Sound. Let's see if we can do that. Good evening, everybody.
There you go.
Well, anyway, the story that I would like to share does involve this epic ski mountaineering traverse that me and my best buddy planned. It was a little overly ambitious, for sure. But mainly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the one individual who was the instrumental factor in us not only making this trip, but surviving this trip. And that person is the legendary bush pilot, Cliff Hudson, from Hudson Air Service out of Talkeetna. If you've ever been down there in the old days, you know that they are legends down there, the whole deal. And it was 2 bits of advice from Cliff, plus the 2 emergency food airdrops that he managed to get to us. It was the only reason we pulled this trip off and didn't shake hands with the Grim Reaper, basically. And so it was 1984, 35 years ago this month, was when on a dark winter night we sat around with maps and books. My best buddy, Chip Barker from Healy, Alaska, still my best friend down there to this day. When somebody saves your life, you're friends forever, that's for sure. And his beautiful family that are there, they're all still good friends of mine. But we came up with this idea that we would drive to Talkeetna, we would get with Hudson Air Service, he was gonna fly us to the Ruth Glacier, we were gonna start from the Ruth Glacier and climb one little pass over to the Tokasitna Glacier, and then we were going up another unnamed zone over to the Kahiltna Glacier, and then eventually we would get to Kahiltna Pass, down to the Peters Glacier, and then out eventually to Kantishna, where we knew the 2 miners that were there, Dan and Berta, and we could figure we could make a flight home, or maybe if we were feeling good and doing good, we'd just ski the park road back home. which we lived at that east end of the park area there. So after spending the whole winter getting ready, oh, did I mention, neither one of us had ever been on a glacier before. But we weren't afraid of it, and we spent that entire winter getting ready for that. We were going to be the sourdough expedition. We made over boots for our single ski boots, and we made over bags for our cheap sleeping bags, and we were total wool and garments and didn't have any Gore-Tex or anything of that nature. Chip and his partner Linda even made our tent. We got fabric from Tent and Tarp and a sewing machine, and we made this little A-frame Antarctic-style tent, which was bomber and was the best piece of equipment we had. So we figured we could do it. So on March 16th, we figured Lucky St. Patty's Day was the day to start the trip, too. So on the 16th of March, we drove to Talkeetna. And back in those days, everything was Main Street, Talkeetna back then, and the Hudson's place was right there across the street from the Fairview. The airstrip was right there across the street from the Fairview, and the Hudson's, the little Quonset hut there, they had a little diner there, Sparky Burgers. Sparky was the name of their dog that they had, so he was in charge of the kitchen, I'm sure. But we drove down and we pitched our tent by the airstrip there, which was just the dirt strip there, right opposite the Fairview. And we got with Cliff to discuss our ambitions and what he could do for us and those sorts of things. And we got out our maps and we started looking at the route there, and we were showing him exactly where we were hoping to go, and he just started laughing and just like, "You boys ever seen that?" And I'm like, "Cliff, we ain't seen nothing." So he said, well, the first bit of advice that he gave us was, "Well, you boys might consider going another way." And we're like, "Okay, we'll take that. We'll take that as advice." And we logged it in. Plan B, that's what we figured it'd be anyway. So we talked and we discussed and we got it down. And so the deal with Cliff was that, he would fly us in to the Ruth, where we were going to spend a couple days there at the beautiful little mountain house, which is a little 6-sided metal building, used to be. It's quite an elaborate place these days, I think. But we were going to stay there a couple days, acclimate, do some more of our practice before we took off on our trip. And on the way, Cliff decided he'd fly our whole route for us, give us a good look at it so that we could see. He particularly was worried about this one spot of the Tokasitna where they're on the map. The contour lines look quite nice. It looked like we just go right up that ice fall thing there. But he kind of was like I said, "You boys might want to go another way," was what all he kept saying. But he figured we knew what we were doing. He didn't know any better either, because we didn't know what we were doing. But we had ambition, and we basically, had Cliff on our side. So he was going to fly the route with us, and not only that, he was going to eventually deposit 2 sheetrock buckets full of resupply food on the East Fork of the Kahiltna. This is still mid-March, so there's not a lot of traffic. No one had even been to the Ruth that season yet. No one was out at the Kahiltna airstrip starting that official climbing season these days, and then still was like April 1st. But we basically, figured it was all going to work out. And so Lucky St. Patty's Day on the 17th, we loaded up Cliff's little orange Cessna 185, and we got out of there and we took off, and we did. We flew. We got a good look at the Kahiltna where there was a route down where on our maps it had looked okay. And then we flew that Tokasitna zone, and it was a real eye-opener because it was that beautiful little contour lines. It was this gleaming ice blue icefall, active as could be. And so we were already thinking Plan Bs might come into fact, but we weren't sure. So eventually and then over to the Ruth where we're going to land there. So prior to going, we were loading up the plane, and there was enough room in there, and Cliff gets out his little hatchet and sends us over there chopping down spruce trees. So we get like 12 and 3 foot tall spruce trees and clam them in there. It's like we were in a Christmas tree parking lot flying into the Ruth, but it's obviously what it was. It's flat light, it's dead light, and so we're over there on the Ruth flying in low and got the door open and Cliff's calling it, and we're tossing trees out. And eventually we do. We get this nice little 600-foot zone of landing zone, and these spruce trees were the running lights, basically. And so Cliff comes back around, puts us down on there, no problem, and we get out, we get all of our equipment out, and very quickly, Cliff's taxiing away, and then we're standing there, and we watch that orange Cessna just like fly away, and it's just like forever flying away. It just turned into this little tiny speck, and then it banked to the right and went into the Great Gorge and down the Ruth, and we looked at each other and looked around, and that was like the moment of the scope of this operation. Finally dawned on us. But there we were. We had no choice now, and we did. It was a full moon as well, so we were timing that. We had a beautiful two days there, staying at this little hut, and roping up and doing everything. We knew about glaciers. We'd never been on glaciers before, but we had every book about it, and we knew all of the facilities. We spent the whole winter around Healy. You might have seen us rappelling off the Parks Highway Bridge there at McKinley Village in the middle of the night. We were doing that kind of thing, and we were busy sewing up all of our equipment and stuff, and finally there we were, and Cliff was gone. And so we began our trip, and that weather, that window weather, the day we were to leave, it was the 20th by then, totally, socked in. But we went anyway. We figured we didn't have it. Our goal was to go light and fast. We were a little ahead of our time. We were light. We just weren't fast. And we figured the whole thing was on paper, it looked easy. It's like 100 miles, 30 miles as a crow flies if he went straight through the mountains. And we thought, well, if everything's good, we can be in Kantishna in 15 days, we thought. We kind of figured we'd gear up for a 20-day trip or something of that nature. But that was an extremely stormy year. That was, in fact, the year of the first winter ascent by the famed Japanese explorer, Naomi Yamura. Unfortunately, he disappeared on the way down and was never seen again, blown off the mountain by the storms. So it was a stormy season. We were kind of, how it is up here when you sort of bet against the weather, or you bet that the weather's going to be on your side, and we might have lost that bet somewhere along the way. I'm not exactly sure, but we did decide to go for it. We left a little 4-pack of top ramen there at that little hut in case we had to come back for it, and we took our packs loaded to the gills. And and one other important thing I forgot to mention there with Cliff, the other bit of advice he gave us was to take this ground-to-air radio. And we were like no fools there, and we kind of neither one of us had room for a pack of chewing gum in our backpacks, but this radio looked like a good idea and a spare battery, and that thing did save us without a doubt. So there we were with all our gear in foul weather, and we took off the first obstacle, Pittock Pass, scooting underneath this giant ice wall, which had the day before just obliterated our tracks with a giant avalanche because we broke trail up to that pass to take a look at it. That was going to be our direction. And sure enough, we just watched this cloud just erase all of our tracks there. So we scampered right through that zone without, taking pictures or anything like that. And we couldn't see, which was good, because it was not a pretty sight. But we did make over Pittock Pass, and we did find a camp there. And eventually the weather improved, and we were able to get onto the Tokasitna. And Cliff was right. We should have gone another way, because we wasted almost a week of food and fuel and time trying to get through this ice fall. We went directly into it, but it was massive and it was active. It was like the Khumbu, but we didn't have aluminum ladders and Sherpas and things like that. In fact, we had one rope and 3 ice screws. That was our kit for this trip, and all of our homemade gear, which we were confident in. But we wound up striking out on this icefall zone here, and our last resort was this big end run around the whole mountain that was pinching off and forcing this thing in, and that was like our only hope was, well, it's longer and it was steeper and it was a bigger climb, and we went for that, and we busted out of there that morning after dwindling our food supply down to not much. We knew the 4 packs of top ramen were behind us, but we had a little bit, and we were still going for it. And we knew Cliff had our buckets of food, and they were going to be at the East Fork when we got there. So we still felt pretty good about things. And we took off and wound up. It was a substantial climb, actually. We spent a long part of that day front pointing up steep blue ice. And eventually, it got dark. And we didn't make it up all the way up out of there. And we were just kind of like, we were pretty proud of ourselves for the one thing. At the gas station there outside of Talkeetna, we bought two of those little keychain flashlights, you squeeze. So as darkness is following us, we got our little keychain flashlights in our mouth, and we found a spot where it wasn't sheer. There was nowhere to pitch a tent, absolutely. You couldn't scrape out a platform anywhere near big enough for a tent. But we did find one little bit of slope that was gradual enough that we dug this little cave. And we're gonna spend the night in this little cave. And in the end, we did get back up in there. It was kind of like being poolside, sitting in some Chase, lounger that wouldn't go back. And the umbrella was right down over us like this. And we had this huge view of the whole Tokasetna, Mount Hunter, everything was right there. And, of course, the storm cycle starts back up. And so we spent 2 nights in that little cave. Basically, there was nowhere else for us to go. We were in that cave. And that first night, it was probably 6 or 8 hours into the big storm when the first, the big cliff above us started shedding all of its powder sloughs of avalanche. And they would just come right over the top of our little cave and seal it off, with our feet sticking out. So we kind of dealt with that, and we got our little tarp, and we sort of made our little cave a little bit more improved. But over the course of that 2 days, I bet we had at least a dozen major slides just seal us off, except for our feet sticking out. But the storm broke. We had 1 package of Knorr split pea soup left. We saved it, thinking we'd either need it to get back to the top ramen or we were going to need it to get up the last of this climb that we had to do. And it did. It broke up nice and sunny. And, that whole time, this was 10 days later now, finally. We were, after everything, it was 10 days later from when we had left on this little bit. And 3 days later, since we started the climb, we finally finished it. We came out of our little cave in the blinding light, and it was just like, oh my gosh. But we did. We cramponed up the last little bit, and we got up to a wall of snow. It must have been 4 feet of snow that we had to start breaking trail in. So now we're drop your packs, you take turns breaking trail, come back, get the packs, come back, drop that. We did that like once. And then we're standing there thinking, this is not looking good. And those top ramen back there are starting to sound really good. And it was right then we heard it. And there came that orange 185 around the shoulder of this big old mountain. And it was Cliff. He was flying around to look for us and see how we were doing. And the radio comes out real quick. We got the radio. Cliff, is that you? And he's like, yeah, how you boys doing? Been a hell of a storm, ain't it? And they're like, yeah, been a hell of a storm. But we're doing okay, except we're out of food. We're wondering, maybe you got a suggestion for us. And he said, no problem. I got you buckets of food right here. So, of course, that's how things would work with a good, customer service individual like Cliff Hudson. He wasn't going to fly out there without our food, and it was the time that we thought we might be at the point where we were expected to find our buckets of food. So Cliff came looking for us. He was flying around, just joyriding around, and there we were, and we were finally in a spot where we could relax because we did get off of that head wall, and we did get up on this gigantic plateau of gigantic crevasses, avalanche spires here. Mount Hunter was right here. We're still trying to get to Kahiltna, which, we figure, that's where our food is. But then Cliff shows up with these buckets of food, and it's like, awesome. Cliff, just either one of those buckets and some fuel. If you got some fuel, and he's like, yeah, I got your fuel. And he does. He comes in, does that thing low and slow, and out comes this bucket of food with some orange survey ribbon tied to it and poof into the snow there. you know, and then 2 gallons of Blazo. We didn't need all 2 cans of Blazo, but we were happy to have it at that point in time. And so there we were. We've got food. We've got, you know, we've got hope. Our little candle, our glimmer of hope started burning again after our desperate situation. And we're like, thank you, Cliff. You can't believe how thankful we are. You are a man. And he's like, yeah, well, good luck. But hold on, I got something else for you. And we're like looking at each other, and he's flying around. He comes back around again, same thing, low and slow. And then out of the cockpit, this red stuffed sack, you know, with orange streamers, looked like some kind of tropical bird of paradise. Somebody just shot with a 12 gauge. Poof! Right to the snow, right there in front of us. We opened that bag, there were 4 Budweisers in there. There's only one thing you can do with 4 Budweisers at 20 below, so we're cracking those things, and they're spewing everywhere, and we got beer in our beards for days afterwards and all over our clothes. And then we're wondering, well, I wonder where the other 2 beers are, and what the hell is he doing flying around out here with a 6-pack anyway, you know? And we finally figured out it was some dirtbag climbers must have left the beer in there, and he tossed it out. And where the other 2 were, who knows? But Cliff to the rescue for sure. So the snow was too deep. We couldn't travel. We needed to let it settle. So we pitched camp right there, and we did find a secure spot to do that and got our little homemade tent up and decided to catch up on a few meals, and the storms came again, but at least we got some food. We got plenty of fuel at this point in time, so, you know, that's not a problem. And then during the course of that storm, the next day, we didn't really move camp, but we did, you know, rope up and go in the direction we needed to do. We had wands with ribbons, these little bamboo things you could do. So we kind of found our way to finish this end run to get back over to where we needed to be to then climb over and drop down onto the Kahiltna. We felt pretty good about that. And then the following day, we got a break in the weather. And we did it. We loaded up our gear. We got ourselves moving, and we wound up on the pass. Looking, there's Mount Farquhar and Creon, and there's the Kahiltna down there. And it's like we're feeling pretty good about this trip again, after not feeling so good about it there for a while. In that snow cave for those 2 days, we didn't feel so good, that's for sure. But here we are. But then the reverse of kind of what happened before, we almost made it up the head wall. We almost made it down on the other side to get to the Kahiltna, but not quite. And we wound up in a really, really heavily crevassed zone. And again, darkness kept us from it. It's a new moon now. We had the full moon at the beginning of the trip, and now we got nothing but a little bit of starlight, you know, and our little keychain flashlights, you know, are working pretty good so far. And so we set up camp, and that was a big storm cycle too. We probably got 6 feet of snow on us in the 4 days that we sat there, a couple hundred feet above the Kahiltna where we were trying to get to. So all of that happened, and all of that rolled through, and even after Cliff had given us the bucket of food, we were running out again, and it was obvious to us we got 2 options coming up now. If we can get to this airstrip, we're going to wind up having to fly back to Talkeetna, and that's going to be the end of it, instead of going on and to Kantishna, unless we can get Cliff to do a little food shop for us. So we've got the radio like handy, and it is April 1st or 2nd that particular day. And sure enough, planes are flying. The first plane over, we got them on the radio, is K2 Aviation. Made comment about wanting to get a message to Cliff, and they're like, no problem, Cliff's right behind us. He'll be there soon. And he was. That little orange Cessna cruising along, and he was bringing in 2 groups that day, a West Rib climb and a West Buttress climb. And he was just like, yep, it shouldn't be a problem. We'll see what we can do. You boys are doing okay, and yep, we'll see what we can do. So that little candle of hope was burning even brighter now. And so we're pushing and we're going. We're gonna make as much time. We made a lot of miles up that particular day on the Kahiltna. And it was later in the day, Cliff was coming back on one of his final runs, and we could see him, and we could see he was looking for us. He was flying low and coming around, so we got the radio out again, and he's flying over, and we're, Cliff, we're over here, and he sees us, and he comes over and like, yep, I got some food for you guys. And so he does the same thing. Orange Cessna coming in low and slow, and this burlap sack comes out. Oh, and I forgot one other thing, too. When we ordered our food, we threw in and a pack of rolling tobacco if you got any. Chip was dying for a cigarette, and I was ready to start smoking after what had happened up to that point. So here comes Cliff. He tosses out this burlap sack full of food, and we had made it simple and easy. It was like minute rice, oatmeal, brown sugar, some butter, and some cigarette tobacco if you can get it. And so all that food came out, and then this little bottle rocket came shooting out, and it was a sock, and it had this long, orange streamer on the end of it. Just, pew, poof, pack of Marlboros just landed right there by Chip, And so he's firing up a cigarette, and I got the radio, and it's like, Cliff, definitely you are the man. And we knew it, and we were going to tell everybody. And he's chuckling. He had a little chuckle. He didn't really laugh, but he chuckled a lot. And he's like, yep, okay, well, you boys, good luck. And hold on, I got something else for you. And Chip and I are looking. This is my buddy Chip Barker again. We've been friends forever. We're looking at each other, and we're both thinking, Budweiser? Because he brought us everything else we had, but he comes around low and slow again, and that same bird of paradise comes flying out and poof right to the ground. 2 Sparky burgers with French fries. Cliff, you're the man for sure. And a dozen packets of ketchup. We were eating those like those fancy, goo packets, It was like... So now we're feeling a lot better about things, thanks to Cliff Hudson and his knowing what to do. And we've got our food, and we push hard, and we get to this airstrip, in the evening. And there's some tents over here and another couple of tents over here, and nobody around. They're all in their tents. And Chip and I, we pitch our little homemade tent, and we go to sleep. We wake up in the morning, there's this 12 people standing around looking at our little tent, and we come out there, and they're like, where the hell did you guys come from, No planes, no nothing, but then we got to hang out with the RMI, Rainier Mountaineering Institute, their trip leader, Eric Simonson, quite a famous guy. He was the guy that organized the expedition that went to Everest and found George Mallory on the side of the mountain. Conrad Anker found him, but Eric was the guy that put that all together. So he was entertained by our little homemade outfit. He said we looked like we were dressed for a walk out to the woodpile. I wrote that in my journal. But he thought our homemade tent was incredible. He couldn't believe that, that we had built this little thing, and it was this center pole tent that didn't have a center pole. We had this unique way of having an external frame holding it all together, and it was kind of a genius situation. And so we were hanging out with all these guys and all their bright clothes and all their almond roca and hot Jell-O drinks. We hated to leave them, but in the end, we had to, because we were committed now. We had food, and we were going to make it. We just knew we were going to make it, especially after what we'd been through. We felt pretty good that we're going to pull this off. And so we did. We wound up hanging out there a couple days and, kind of got our strength back and got our feet less achy, and we started off again and got up and over Kahiltna Pass and then down on the other side, just instantly into the shade and the cold of the north side of Denali and the Wickersham Wall and everything. And so we're down on Peters Glacier, and we still think we can survive this cold, because that's what we've done a bunch of years of. Even though it was 1984, we'd been around for a couple of winters, and we felt good about being able to hold up to the cold and stuff. So we just had this final obstacle of just getting to Kantishna. But to do that, there was one more obstacle that we had to go through, and it's a little place on the map known as Tluna Ice Falls. And it was a big area, and we were, from the beginning, Chip, 6'6", 240, me 5'10", 170. I was the crevasse locator. He was the anchor. Basically, we traded out breaking trail and route finding, but sometimes in the dicey situations, I would probe and he would belay, and we were in the process of doing that. We had this one little swaggy zone here that we needed to cross it, so we dropped the packs. He's got a little belay going. I'm on my skis, walking out with my long ice axe, probing. I'm just out there, and I'm about to announce, I think this is okay, when the trap door went, just like this. And it was about a 6-foot by 10-foot trap door that dropped right out from under me. And Chip's on belay. There's a period of about an hour. I'm not really sure what he was doing, and he's not really sure what I was doing when the whole thing was going on. But in the end, I wound up like a little spider. I still remember it. It was like 20 feet to one wall and about 15 feet to one wall, and it was like 80-foot drop down to the just icy blue wedge where the Grim Reaper, I could see him down there. He was looking up with a big grin, and I was hanging on that rope looking up at these 2 cantilevered, snow bridges and a 6x8 opening to the sky. And so we had practiced everything, and so there it was. I was a Boy Scout. I was prepared. I had some cords in my pocket, and I got my skis off, and I lashed my skis to my chest, and then I got my Jumars. These are the mechanical ascending devices that you can put on a rope, and you can move right up that rope. All the rock climbers do that sort of thing. So I've got those on, and I'm up to where my ropes are disappearing into this 4-foot wall of fresh snow. And I'm there, and Chip's, like, "Hey, are you okay?" I'm like, "Well, what'd you see?" We did that back and forth. We did that back and forth for a little while. And then I guess the first clue for Chip being up there trying to get a secure belay, and, and the rule of thumb, too, we broke every rule going out there. It's 3 guys on a rope. That's what's safe. Not 2 guys on a rope. There's no guy in the middle to help out, so we didn't have that going. But in the end, I was up there. I Jumar'd up, and I couldn't get Jumars to go past anything. It was just like a wall of snow there, and I'm hanging. I'm just dangling from the rope there. And so Chip finally figures out that I'm doing okay when my ski poles come launching out, and one of my skis comes launching out and lands up there on the sky. And then the other ski, I wound up just kind of digging and shoveling and troweling, bludgeoning around and trying to get to where I could get my Jumars up from the air and the free rope and pushed into the snow, but I couldn't. There was no way to do it. I wasn't sure exactly what to do. And in the end, it was like, well, so pretend this is a big horse, and I've got my Jumars here, and I'm hanging, and I tied this loop. So if you're ever in this situation, this is what you got to do. You got to tie this loop right under your Jumar, and you just got to get your foot in it. And then it's like the biggest horse you've ever tried to get on in your life, and swing and kick around, and was able to stand up and kind of belly flop out onto that snow and relax a little bit and get the Jumars up, and then manage to get off of the cantilevered bridge there. And that was probably one of the more closer situations where the pucker factor was way up. Way up at that point. But we rerouted. We went around that little section, and then it was downhill, and we had the moraines of the Peters Glacier, and then we had the horrible depth horror. You couldn't ski with your pack on. We had one guy would go out without a pack, breaking trail, and the other guy would catch him and then drop his pack, and then that guy would go back and get his pack, and then this guy would go without his pack until this guy came and caught, and then we did that all the way to Turtle Hill, I think, and wound up only about 5 days behind our real schedule, and wound up coming out to Wonder Lake and to Camp Denali, where my good friends Molly and Jerry Cole, the owners of Camp Denali, they were there celebrating their son's 13th birthday, Land, who's still one of my best friends ever. So we finished this, we called it there for the longest time the SAMX, skiing around McKinley expedition. But then we was like, no, skiing around Denali sounds better, SAD, it was the SAD expedition. Instead of the SAM expedition. And in the end, it was like, no, starving around Denali. That's what it was. The starving around Denali expedition. And we walk into birthday cake, homemade ice cream, pecan pie, real mashed potatoes, and an unlimited buffet of food that was available to us. And we eventually did get a flight back home from there instead of skiing out. But it's all because of Cliff Hudson. It was the only reason that we were able to do this thing. And so my hat's off to all those customer service pilots out there taking care of the people out there, and the Hudson world was so important to he and I, and it's the only reason I'm here today talking to you guys, because that one dark winter night when we planned this overly ambitious trip that we would have never made without Cliff Hudson. And thank you all for listening.
Mike Speaks. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I got a few people I want to thank. Sarah Smith from Frank's Menswear. What do you think? Imagine how good this would look on a handsome man. Photograph for our poster and program by Sasha Leos. Again, Tim Palmer, thank you for the introduction. Papa John's donated pizza. What did you think of the Sarah Vendi Marimba Ensemble out in the foyer there? Did you like that? Jill Ann Gates and Kangoo Club Fairbanks. Don't forget to check them out on Facebook. I'm going to watch that intro, the video of that intro every night before I go to bed and whisper to myself, you finally made it. Pause for Purple Hearts. Thank you so much, Malik and his handler, Betsy Jacobs, Lori Neufeld, and KUAC for airing Dark Winter Nights. Subscribe to our podcast. John Huff and the team at Alaska Universal Productions. All of our volunteers and the real force behind Dark Winter Nights, the only reason it continues, are executive producers. Amanda, I'm no longer an executive producer, Huff. Ryan, Dr. Thunder Peterson. Robin, Vegomatic Robin. She has no last name. Chris, Chicken Soup Zwolinski. Jared, I'll laugh at anything, Huey. Alyssa, Give Me Your Shoes, Enriquez. Brittany, Puzzle Me This, Carnes. And Katie, Please Pass the M&M Machine, Ott. I'd also like to thank the UAF Communication and Journalism Department, who have supported this idea from the very beginning, and Brian O'Donohue, who approved the very first show. And none of this would exist without UAF. I just want to make that point right now. Please sign up for my classes. And our storytellers, Hailey McCaig, Mike Ruckhaus, Kat Kershner, and Linda Bode, Taryn Hughes, the Pava Nupiaq dancers, Bobby Burgess, and Mike Speaks. Remember, these are the stories we have always been telling up here on Dark Winter Nights. Have a good night.